A rainy day arrived, and the young woman decided to go to the police regarding a family problem. She was tired in front of the counter, explaining that her husband had been acting strangely since the night before. The man asked for details about what happened, and she, sadly, lowered her gaze to the floor. She shocked him by revealing that the most disturbing thing was their intimacy, with deep desolation on her face. That day, after 2 years of marriage, she noticed a crucial detail that immediately alerted her about her husband. In all this time, he had never sweated like that, and she supposed he might not be in his right mind. Despite the usual acts, that whole night seemed opposite to his normal behavior. Before, her husband Hyun was always attentive and careful because of the blindness the young woman suffered from. However, that time he was so insatiable and fast that she didn't understand the reason for such a change. Before he was boring and slow in bed, but at that moment he was so voracious that she got scared. He mumbled about marks that should be visible, and time and again he left hickeys on her neck. She couldn't believe her ears when he rose over her and snapped at her not to dare do that with anyone else. The next morning, as if nothing had happened, she was getting ready to go to work, where So Ryong accompanied him with her usual care. She calmly mentioned that one of her neighbors was moving out, but the man only said there would soon be silence there. The young woman tried to clarify what exactly he meant, but he immediately caressed her. And he asked her how she felt after the night. She only replied thoughtfully that it was the first time she discovered that intimacy could be so exhausting and painful. So Ryong tried to accompany him to work as quickly as possible, but the very next instant something happened that alarmed her even more. In an inexplicable silence, she suddenly felt like their eyes met, which only intensified her tension. She couldn't see him, but she felt deep within her being like her husband's face. Always smiling. It no longer radiated joy. So Ryong felt the cold emanating from his expressionless face, after which he announced he was leaving. She wanted to ask him about that, but she couldn't, as her doctor said that questioning and doubting everything was a bad sign. As soon as the door closed, she heard in the distance that he was leaving work, as his transfer had ended. At first she thought she had imagined it, but a new wave of suspicions manifested when, for the first time, he did not return on time. Before, he never left her alone for long because of her blindness, but now he didn't even answer her phone calls. She couldn't believe what she heard, upon hearing that the number she had dialed did not exist, or was temporarily blocked. Her torrent of thoughts began with the idea that something might have happened to him, but it ended tangled like a ball of yarn. She was so absorbed in her torrent of thoughts while preparing dinner that she felt a deep cut on her hand at the last moment. The young woman had called him since the morning, but her attempts to contact her beloved husband had yielded no results. In her head remained only 2 words about her husband's disappearance, which she couldn't stop thinking about for a minute. Finally, the policeman said they could start searching for the missing person after 1 day without contact, and that she should wait. So Ryan was instantly surprised when he clarified that this applied to situations unrelated to a crime. As soon as she suggested that someone might disguise an attack as a disappearance, she pulled out a bloody knife. Her heavy gaze was lowered when the policeman calmly asked her whose blood it was. The girl was so devastated by the disappearance of her beloved husband that a new idea arose in her mind. Unexpectedly, she asked the man if they would find him faster if she said that blood belonged to her husband. That man was everything to her, and their meeting occurred when she was around 24 years old. He introduced himself as an employee of a company, something she heard right after learning about unexpected retinal problems. The girl was stunned, as she had never had such problems before, making their meeting particularly impactful. The man kindly provided her with a cane for the blind, after which she asked him to stay for a moment. Soryan explained by saying she had her hands full, which made it difficult to move during the heavy rain. The girl couldn't believe all this was happening to her, as she always tried to be good and right. At that moment, she felt insignificant, empty, and miserable, but he appeared showing her a little attention. The man supposed she was very cold and offered her a cup of hot tea, which unintentionally cheered up the girl. She felt his tender touch and suddenly understood that a bright sunbeam was entering her fading world. Then he tried to cheer her up and show her that despite the problem, her life must go on. The day after the report at the police station, So-ryan learned some astonishing news about the inspection of her house. The detective left her dumbfounded by telling her that only the Han So-ryan family lived in that house, something that seemed unthinkable to her. He scratched his head perplexed, not understanding how, in just a couple of days, all the former tenants had left the house. The blind girl couldn't believe that really no one lived in that house, something she should have known for sure. In recent days, so much unexpected news had rained down on her that she struggled to find the right words. She screamed that something was wrong, as she swore she had greeted her neighbors when passing by. So Ryan collapsed when the policeman addressed the detective after a phone call. He looked away, surprised, processing the information from the police headquarters. So Ryan's world fell apart upon hearing that there was no Kim Hyun in the civil registry. After that news, her life was hell, living under the yoke of mental anguish. A month after her husband's disappearance, she tried to cope by attending church. She went to the temple as usual, but the same situation repeated itself over and over in her head. So Ryan pestered the police, but the detective demanded composure and threatened her with arrest. She sought help, but they kept telling her there was no information and that he might have hidden motives. Then she understood that she was alone and that no one could help her with her problem. The man on duty greeted her uneasily, noticing how haggard and exhausted she looked today. He tried to offer her a seat to rest, but she only said everything was fine. And kept going. Halfway to the exit, So Ryan suddenly stopped and asked him if he truly believed in what he could not see. She begged him to open his eyes and not become like her, but he replied that it is not necessary to see everything to know. For some reason, his words that faith does not always require a reason touched her heart. And she was instantly stunned. After these words, the girl smiled crookedly and looked down, saying she didn't know why it happened this way. She had come to love him despite not seeing his face, feeling only the warmth and the large size of his hands. So-ryan thought he was her salvation, as she had never had such a wonderful person in her life like him. That man was a miracle to her that suddenly disappeared, evaporating as if he had never existed. After this, the girl completely broke down. Tears streamed from her eyes, and she said that everything had come too easily to her. The priest wanted to support her, and, quoting a passage from the Bible, said that this encounter might be God's work. With a smile, he added that she would find if she searched, and they would open for her if she knocked on all doors. So-ryan didn't pay much attention to his words until she felt a brochure that instantly surprised her. It offered high-quality person-finding services throughout South Korea. In charge of the organization. She didn't know what surprised her more, as discovering she could see everything written was something completely new to her. Immediately afterwards, she quickly visited the doctor, astonishing him by confirming that her sight had truly returned. So-ryan herself didn't understand how it was possible that the fog in her eyes disappeared along with her husband. The woman sitting opposite immediately contacted the scientific community, whose members confirmed the assumptions. In her entire ophthalmology practice, she had never seen anything like this, as 2 years ago she had been diagnosed with retinal degeneration. So-ryan froze when the doctor unexpectedly suggested that someone might have periodically affected her optic nerve, paralyzing it. She instantly remembered when, at the clinic, they were putting drops of unknown origin into her retina. That smiling man, who so carefully helped her with her sight, was her fugitive husband. After this, the girl tried to remain calm and asked if her attending physician had changed. The woman replied immediately that she had replaced Dr. Park, who had a great job opportunity abroad. Suddenly, So-ryan assumed that her husband could not live alone and became withdrawn, ignoring the doctor's words. She relived a happy moment of their life together, when he told her he had hung their wedding photo on the wall. The girl sadly recounted how interested she was in knowing what facial expression he had at that moment. He kept caressing her face tenderly, regretting never being able to see the face of her beloved. He decided to cheer her up and lifted the corner of her lips with a finger, saying they both looked very happy in that photo. That day was immensely happy. Little did she know that years later she would discover a terrible truth about that man. She went to the agency and discovered that everything, from his name, the company, and even the car license plate, was fake. She also learned that there were no surveillance cameras either in the house or on the street, and even potential witnesses in the house had disappeared. The agency employees suggested that it all looked like an organized operation. And then they offered to tell her about the neighbors. The girl quickly started explaining that a young man with a dog lived in the apartment next door, with whom she had spoken once. Now she knew for certain that she wanted to find real answers to her questions, and not just assumptions and conjectures. After the conversation, she looked in the mirror and decided that this way, without a doubt, she would recover what had accidentally become her life. A few days later, she went to the building where the agency employees worked to get new details. Once inside, the girl calmly asked if they had found out anything about her husband. Her face reflected a sincere shadow of hope, which did not disappear even though they couldn't please her with information. Finally, she stood frozen waiting for the girl, who had previously been silent, to decide to speak. Her astonishment was huge when she suddenly jumped up and asked who she had been living with all this time. She vehemently expressed indignation, saying that ripping out his tongue would be too light a punishment for such a scoundrel. Showing her impulsiveness, the man decided to calm his colleague and introduced himself as Jeon Pil-jae, head of the Information Analysis Department at Blast. It was a private military company offering warfare services in conflict zones abroad. With this information, Seo Rayong went to a detective agency, a small business they manage. He noticed the girl's cautious gaze and felt uncomfortable, finally deciding to get straight to the point. The colleague sitting next to him became instantly furious as soon as he admitted they could not accept her case. When asked why, she replied that most of the neighbors' names she mentioned were also fake. Seo Ryong felt the earth swallow her up upon hearing that even the schools and companies were a sham. To her fortune, the employee adopted a thoughtful attitude and said that her husband's scoundrel had made a mistake. She affirmed that even though the names were false, her neighbor did have a dog whose name turned out to be real. The girl handed him a photo of the pet and added that they had contacted the veterinarian and found out the owner's name. It was a 67-year-old woman named Kim Jong-mai, and they then verified her credit card receipts from the last 5 years. That said, the girl handed him her phone with a satisfied smile so he could see the screen. It turned out they were receipts from a bookstore for questions on the 9th rank exam for the National Intelligence Service. Analyzing the information closely, Seo Ryong couldn't believe this was related to the intelligence service. The man thoughtfully added that this old woman had a son who might work at a publishing house. He also clarified that field agents usually disguise themselves as these types of professions, and he might have infiltrated as her neighbor. This information seemed so far-fetched that Seo Ryong only blinked, stunned by the surprise. She froze when the office employee suddenly asked her who she was for them to treat her like that. All this seemed as unthinkable to her as if she had fallen into the plot of a detective movie. He didn't understand what could have motivated the man to buy the entire house and control the entire territory. The man stated quite seriously that such a magnitude is not typical of an operation. And common agents. She was completely finished when he told her that a black intelligence agent was watching her pretending to be her husband. His identity could only be known by the intelligence top brass, which complicated the search for information. His main skill was hiding his name, his face, and never leaving any trace behind him. Finally, the man concluded that if all their assumptions were correct, they would never be able to reveal her husband's true identity. He might have been hidden for years under different missions, carrying out task after task without being discovered. She didn't even suspect that after the mission, he would go to the barracks, where he would take off the mask from his face like a second skin. The employee observing him compared him to a repulsive snake shedding its skin after a certain time. He was no One-chan, the hacker for the Field Support Group of the Foreign Interests Department of the NRS. Finally, he lifted his head from the monitors and asked his boss if he had managed to escape safe. In sound, Li Wuzing, whose code name was Mask, got into the car and said with a smile that he left there without looking back. The hacker still couldn't believe that he used a silicone mask and even a chip to change his voice, which terrified him. He added that now he couldn't trust anyone, and then spoke about how well his boss acted. The boy, with nervousness in his voice, commented that at some point he really started to think that the boss had fallen in love. He immediately had to shut up when the man replied sternly that he was talking too much. The boy decided to change the subject and talked about his target called Owl, saying that she truly loved him. He also told him about the commotion she caused a month ago at the local branch, smearing herself with blood. The hacker worried upon hearing the car suddenly accelerate and his boss not saying a word. Then he slowed down and stopped, demanding that he tell him whose blood he had on him. He lied, saying it was his blood from a cut on his hand. But the report was processed quickly, and they discovered the fake documents. Wang Chang, smiling, admitted that Bu was quite smart, even managing to get security videos from the station. Li Wuzin, furious, replied that his marriage was fake and his role as husband was mere coincidence. Since she was the target, he ordered him not to look back and asked if he was worried about having an affair with a civilian. The phrase sounded so conceited and humiliating that the hacker unintentionally fell and bit his lip in disgust. Without waiting for a response, the boss demanded that he show him the agency that trains undercover agents without sexual experience. Blood almost came out of the young man's ears when he added that his brother should take him to a kindergarten to grow up innocent. Finally, Li Wuzin angrily decreed that he should never mention the word owl in his presence again. And forget everything. The boy immediately accepted his condition and then asked how his resignation request was going. Suddenly, he realized that his boss had cut the communication and leaned back, voicing his great displeasure out loud. Despite everything he told him, the hacker still believed that true feelings could have developed during that time. To finish, he looked once more at the face of the girl with a ruined destiny. And he said goodbye, hoping she would soon forget her boss. The next day, Hyun went to a coffee shop to meet with an active office employee. The same unperturbed expression as always remained on the girl's face. The young woman whispered to her if she really planned to flee to North Korea. So Hyun calmly told her she was going to level up, at least to international crime, to deal with the black agent. She added that she needed to level up, at least to international crime, to deal with the black agent. The girl said she wanted her advice, since she herself had come from North Korea. Finally, she concluded that she had to fall into the clutches of the NRS to track down the black agent. Who was her husband? The girl in front of her couldn't hide her astonishment upon hearing that she would join the ANB if she did something wrong. For some reason, she was absolutely sure that this way she would meet the active agents. Mentally, she addressed her husband, Kim Hyun, and promised that they would meet again. And he would look for her. Days later, Seo Ryong began to execute her plan, which she would carry out on the border bridge. She was rapidly approaching the checkpoint, where some sleepy soldiers were located. They were so concerned about their deplorable state that they didn't even see the car speeding towards them. Suddenly, she remembered the conversation in the cafe, where she said she still didn't know what she would do if she were caught. Seo, Ryong thoughtfully asked what she should do, whether she should kill him or love him even more intensely. She thoughtfully spun the straw between her fingers, feeling a multitude of thoughts swirling in her head. Finally, she smiled and declared that every day was already filled with bitterness, so she didn't have much choice. Her deep thoughts were interrupted by the soldier's astonished face, who finally noticed the approaching car. Seeing it, the girl stepped on the gas pedal fully, completely ignoring the order to stop immediately. So Ryjun broke the barrier and mentally waited for them to finally capture her and take her straight to her husband. Looking through the driver's window, the girl felt mental pleasure, understanding that this was enough for them to arrest her. Finally, she stopped and heard the soldiers running towards her, gasping after the intense chase. At one point, she tensed up seeing him suddenly collapse on the ground. Because he had become ill. She turned back, annoyed, trying to understand why they weren't arresting her like a criminal. So Ryan felt enormous tension and stepped on the gas again, wanting to draw even more attention to herself. The girl decided to commit a crime and drove, without permission, towards the bridge connecting to North Korea. However, she was forced to stop when bullets pierced the windshield, and smoke erupted from the engine. So Ryan felt she was actively losing control and held the steering wheel with all her might to regain it. Immediately afterward, the car stopped and more smoke came out of the engine, announcing a breakdown. She froze, her face against the airbag, while the soldiers kept shouting at her. Hyun wanted them to forcibly remove her from the car and take her to the police station. So she remained silent. She complied with their demand and rolled down the window, after which they told her in unison that she was arrested from that moment. They were very surprised that she remained silent, as if none of this was happening to her. At that moment, her body was so full of adrenaline that she even felt a certain delight at the success of the plan. That very night, she ended up at the police station, where they actively prepared her for interrogation as a criminal. She didn't react in any way to the appearance of the investigators in the room, and remained silent thoughtfully. As soon as she saw the men enter the room, she immediately began preparing for what was to come. It was as if she didn't hear anything they were saying, which only provoked a hysterical smile on her. Finally, the man declared that, because of her, all group tour were canceled until the end of the investigation. Blaming her for it, he couldn't hide his astonishment when she suddenly replied calmly that it was good. Something that didn't fit the situation at all. Sir Ryan calmly said there was a soldier who had fainted from hyperventilation, and that it was best for him to rest in the hospital. The man adjusted his hair annoyed and said that national security law provided punishment even for provocation. He added that all statements she made now would affect her case, and then asked the reason for her escape. After that, he decided to change the question and asked who Kim Hyun was, since before she had only mentioned his name. The girl maintained titanic calm and briefly replied that the man was her husband. The investigator was skeptical of her words, since, according to the documents, she was not married. Surya understood that he would hardly believe her story and stated that, in essence, they had lived in marriage for 2 years. The man carefully read the case details and asked to confirm the recent disappearance report of Kim Hyun. She froze instantly when he asked her if that man was the reason for her escape. Suddenly, the girl started talking about the chairman of the State Defense Committee of North Korea. She shocked them even more by saying with a smile that her husband often repeated those words. So Ryhun added that at first she wanted to report the spy, but it was complicated because she didn't know his real name or face. She looked significantly at the men sitting in front of her and revealed that she had lived with the spy all this time. A spark of madness shone on her face as she looked at them again and asked them to find him on their own. She added with conviction that it was Kim Hyun himself who fled to North Korea, and it would be a disaster if they let him escape. The girl diverted her gaze, talking about the unknown damage he could cause to the country. And that's why they had to catch him. Those words so disconcerted the investigators that they were silent until they heard a phone ringing. So Ryan analyzed the man's every reaction while talking to the deputy director. She looked with amazement at the room's window and then heard that the investigation would be closed. The man ruled that the escape attempt would be attributed to dementia, plus a 10 million fine. The girl felt the situation slipping out of her hands and screamed at the top of her lungs that her husband could be a spy. She tried to insist that they continue investigating, but the detectives had almost left the room. So Ryhun wouldn't stop screaming that it was impossible until an unexpected idea crossed her mind. She managed to make them stay with a sudden statement. She said they knew Kim Hyun. The girl leaned on the table and asked hysterically why they were trying so hard to hide something. They couldn't take their eyes off her, as she continued railing about the negligence of the spy department. Suddenly, So Ryun looked directly at the man behind the mirror and ordered him out. or she would break it. She addressed that woman directly and proposed playing hide-and-seek, which angered the men. She was infuriated by the suggestion that they should stop these games and end this investigation. Immediately afterwards, she angrily threw a pile of papers off the table and shouted that they were the ones playing games. She kept asking what was wrong with her husband, that they couldn't even conduct a simple investigation. Soryan leaned over the table and squeezed her hair tightly, insisting on what they were hiding. Apparently, the girl succumbed so much to the hysterical fit that she decided to take a break. She looked surprised at one of the men, asking if he wasn't taking his medications correctly. He supposed she had stopped taking them a long time ago. That's why she had delusional ideas about her husband's disappearance. As soon as she started asking about the medications, he coldly cut in that they had already verified her doctor's report. So Rae-young was so surprised to hear that she even doubted if she had ever been to his office. They handed her a sheet with the medical report, and she instantly devoured it with her eyes. It came from Hanmyeom Gongyeon Hospital, the same one she had been going to since she was a child after her diagnosis. It was as if Soryan had erased her visits from memory. New doubts assailed her. The next day, she left for the clinic where she had undergone exams and treatment. Just before, the doctor was listening to news about a failed escape to North Korea. His astonishment exploded upon discovering that the fugitive was his patient, only 20 years old. He was still recovering, and Soryan appeared smiling with a package in her hands. As if nothing, she placed the gift on the table and poured tea with complete naturalness. The doctor was more perplexed to see her without a cane and cured of her blindness. Soryan only said she was getting better, suspecting he influenced her health, expressing her joy because it was reversible. She called him ironic and returned to the table with the man. As soon as the doctor asked how she was and if she got along well with her husband, she inquired why he had fled. She thoughtfully pondered why he had abandoned her, considering she was good and sweet as he taught her. The man felt great nervousness when she continued telling how tender she was like a puppy. And she behaved well. She noticed the drastic change in her doctor's mood and commented how much she had strived to live a good life. During that time, she quit gymnastics, was expelled from school, and even worked caring for the sick. But she ended up in trouble. Every word about how they abandoned her made him tense up more, as he had largely influenced her. Finally, asking why some betray those they cherish, so Hyun addressed the doctor again. For some reason, his cold gaze gave her chills as she asked him directly why her husband did that. He felt really uncomfortable under her piercing gaze and felt incapable of uttering a single word. The man clumsily looked away and pretended not to understand what she was talking about. As soon as he drank from the cup, she remembered rumors that the mafia poisons black tea. This doctor manipulated her for a long time, guided by dark intentions, hinting at betrayal. His words shocked him so much that he stood petrified, feeling a death threat. In an instant, he fell to the ground coughing desperately, with an unbearable burning in his throat. Finally, So Ryan confronted him, accusing him of turning her into a schizophrenic patient and ruining her life. She demanded to know who ordered him to do it, and getting no response, she stomped on him furiously. So Ryan stepped on his throat with all her might, suspecting a connection with her husband, something she had to investigate. She kindly told him her husband's job was confusing her, before more firmly demanding he reveal details. The young woman froze when he finally confessed that they only ordered him to complete one task. The doctor tried to make excuses, saying that at first he thought he wouldn't harm her. As soon as she got the information, So Ryan removed her foot from his throat and picked up her teacup. The man couldn't hide his astonishment, seeing the girl drink from his cup. He still didn't understand her calmness and watched her every move with growing fear. After a short pause, So Ryan turned to the doctor, asking who gave him the order. He hesitated instantly and stammered that they told him about a government institution. He added that afterward they gave him a business card from a publishing house, implying he was an employee. So Ryan connected his words with what the detective from the special agency she visited had told her. At that instant, The girl confirmed that the last few years of her life were an elaborate setup. She understood that the more she searched for her husband, the more she concluded that her reality was an illusion. That man wove a web like a spider and completely destroyed her life, making her sick and useless. It seems she only now realizes that everything around her was always transparent and clear, something she didn't notice. Now she blames herself for the stupidity and naivety that led her to the situation she is in now. Finally, so Ryung headed for the door and lastly turned to the doctor, reminding him that he taught her to wear a mask. He seemed surprised. As soon as she mentioned wanting to stop her psychiatric consultations, the girl froze. Realizing she wants to break that mask, freeing her simple desire to live peacefully, in love and harmony. She felt immense pain realizing she still considered her family life the happiest moment. Controlling her emotions, so Ryung said goodbye to the doctor, ending their relationship as doctor and patient. She closed that chapter of her life, realizing that that snatched family life is her ugly and true face. After that difficult visit to the doctor, who accompanied her throughout her treatment, so Ryung felt deep anguish. Despite how cruel her husband was, she remained obsessed, like an abandoned dog with its master. She lay on the floor, trying to breathe in the remaining scent of his things, recalling their happy moments. Those fragments of memories tormented her day and night, sometimes making her lose herself in reality. Even now, in a simple meeting at a cafe with that girl, she continued sinking into her thoughts. Knowing that she longed for details of her last escape, she said that, although she wasn't injured, she had to pay a fine. Her interlocutor slapped her forehead, dumbfounded to learn that she was fined 10 million won. Then she was instantly surprised that So Ryan proposed meeting after such a fuss. However, So Ryan maintained titanic calm, as if all this was a simple trifle to her. As if nothing, she said she no longer had any acquaintances in that area and needed to kidnap someone. The girl was still plotting ideas for his arrest and decided that her victim should be someone of high status. Suddenly, she thought of the deputy director position at the CIN, without suspecting that her fugitive husband was involved. Right now, he was in a tattoo parlor and replied with some disdain to this man's call. He didn't want to talk about business, so much so that he unintentionally bared his teeth, saying he would smash the phone. The caller begged him in tears to return as soon as possible, while they tattooed a phrase in Russian on him. The man, as if nothing, replied that he was only awaiting the acceptance of his resignation. His phrase provoked the deputy director's indignation, who immediately spoke about how difficult it was to find a replacement. He also mentioned that for 10 years everything had been quiet. But in this mission, 2 intelligence agents unexpectedly died. He was indignant that, in such a situation, Lee Wuksin decided to resign solely for personal reasons. In his resignation letter, he briefly wrote that he suffered from a mental illness, which was not enough to justify resigning. As soon as the deputy director asked if he was in his right mind, Lee Wuksin smiled confidently. He leaned back calmly in his chair and, with a demented smile, asked him if he truly believed he was sane. His caller ignored the question and snapped at him about what bothered him so much that he would abandon him after the mission. However, the agent did not share his anger and reminded him that he had already warned him that he was mentally ill. He began to talk about how much he longed to show his true face without masks. But in the hospital, they called those obsessive ideas. Lee Wuksin added that he had to do it himself, or he would go crazy and destroy his face due to hallucinations. After this unexpected confession, he added that he could no longer be an agent, as he now had a tattoo near his groin. The man on the other end punched the desk and called him crazy when he said he couldn't even have intimacy. He was screaming, condemning him for what he was doing to his body, which belonged to his nation. Then he called him crazy again, alleging that he had even committed adultery with a virgin. Hinting at the target, Lee Wuksin demanded that he stop and said he no longer wanted to wear the mask if they didn't want to return his original face. The substitute used his last card and asked him if he no longer wanted the document. Lee Wuksin responded sharply that he was not giving up. His actions did not mean that. He got up from the chair, as if in a trance, and suddenly released his internal torments. The man admitted that, after 10 years, he was fed up with not being himself because of the mission. He added that, despite living with Owl, he failed and now had absolutely nothing left. Lee Woozin got on the zip line and said it was strange not to have anywhere to vent. Then, the substitute revealed that he was one step away from the NRS leader and would help him. Surprise! He would allow him to use his face and name, as he needed him as a pawn. Apparently, those words struck a chord. The agent finally listened to him attentively. Lee Woozin repeated the question. Could he really act without hiding anymore? After receiving confirmation, he closed his eyes tiredly and agreed, asking what exactly they needed. Finally, he became thoughtful when asked if he had ever heard of the mercenaries from the Blast group. Meanwhile, Ryan was just discussing that same group with her new and active friend. She spoke enthusiastically that, whether she became a deputy director or a boss, she needed basic knowledge for a kidnapping. The girl suggested she learn that, saying that her organization has many specialists in that area. For some reason, Ryan was not very enthusiastic about the offer and asked if learning was mandatory. Her interlocutor instantly reprimanded her for her naivety, as all NRS towers are full of bodyguards, which makes the task difficult. Finally, smiling, she said she was reminded of her younger sister from North Korea and called her special. However, Ryun didn't react much to her words and simply kept thinking about the Blast group. For some reason, she wondered if people like her husband would always be found in circles like this. In her soul, the hope of forgetting that guy and being free, surrounded by others, still shone. However, she clearly understood that she had to choose another path, as indicated by her interlocutor's gaze. She reconsidered the words they had told her and concluded that, in a way, she was completely right. The girl understood that in a world built on strength, she needed skills and power to kidnap someone. Furthermore, she was aware that she needed an assistant, so she had to secure the support of the group. After that, she finally asked the girl about that guy she had met at the police station. She also vaguely recalled that he was the leader of the Blast gang, after which she suddenly said he was her brother-in-law. That casual phrase immediately interested Ryan, so an assumption instantly arose in her mind. Apparently, her interlocutor was not entirely aware of the importance of her words, showing surprise on her face. Ryan continued acting normally, even though she suddenly felt like a predator smelling its prey. Fragments of memories from the meeting assailed her, while a firm idea grew in her mind. The girl concluded that those two were family, which could undoubtedly be useful to her in the future. After the meeting, she decided to visit the mafia boss, whom she asked what he wanted to tell her about Chan-nae. Ryan calmly added that she had already heard that he was her relative. The man watched her perplexed when she claimed that Chan-nae was his wife's younger sister. Immediately after, she handed him a recorder, explaining that she had contacted him to warn him of certain problems. This recording was made during one of their conversations, which she managed to record without the girl noticing. A chill ran down her spine upon hearing his words about how he thought of her husband and his relationship with him. Upon getting the desired reaction, Ryan spoke coldly about her attempt to flee to North Korea across the border. Immediately afterward, Chan-nae's words were heard from the recorder, advising a couple of good ways to escape. She couldn't believe that her colleague and relative had betrayed him like that, advising him on that escape plan. Ryan threatened to expose her the next time he tried to flee. How outrageous. As soon as she put the evidence in her bag, the man angrily hit the table and glared at her. She could see he was at his limit, but still decided to use another card up her sleeve. Slowly, she placed a brochure in front of him and dropped a compromising detail about her older sister's husband. Ryan stared him straight in the eye and asked if he had really been an agent for the National Intelligence Service. She fell, folding the brochure in half, while he demanded to know her intentions. After making a paper airplane with the paper, she ignored his question and called him a truly loyal man. She looked at the heart-shaped figure and hinted that he had left intelligence to get married and take care of defectors. Those defectors were his sisters, whom he protected. That's why he couldn't allow Chan-na to be suspected. She showed him the figure, warning him that his wife could also be affected. Direct threat. Apparently, the man realized that he had been caught off guard. He would have to give in for her to keep silent. After long minutes of silence, Young Pil-ju rubbed his head and asked exactly what she wanted. The man couldn't believe his ears when Seo Ryung simply declared that she wanted to get a job. She thoughtfully looked away and said that, shortly before their meeting, she had been investigating the Blast Company. It turned out to be a subsidiary of the CEWA Group, one of the 3 largest in the world. What power? It served a wide range of clients in East Asia, from countries in conflict to drug cartels. But that wasn't all. It also handled matters for legitimate sovereign states and humanitarian organizations. Thus, it had become a private military company with the most diversified client base one could imagine. Furthermore, it offered a wide range of military services, signing contracts with governments worldwide. This secret business was extremely profitable. Sometimes transactions reached hundreds of billions of wons. So Ryan hinted that even intelligence services resorted to this company when they needed personnel for missions. Chong Pil-jae caught the hint instantly and asked, perplexed, why she would be looking for something like that. However, the girl firmly replied that she only needed a job, which raised even more questions. The man reflected deeply and replied that Blast only recruited people with military skills. He added that they were mainly interested in former employees of the Ministry of Defense, NIS agents, special forces, and retired soldiers. So Ryan was about to explain her capabilities, but he stopped her short, saying her escape to North Korea was enough. What was her surprise when she calmly declared that she wasn't talking about murders, but about cleaning rooms. Now, Chong Pil-jae seriously considered her words, as at first he had assumed she meant homicides. Finally, he recommended her to the company where she planned to work as a cleaner. The recruiter was amazed at how formal she was in the interview, even though he had seen her resume. Finally, he told her she could start on Monday and would only have to clean, cook, and wash the dishes. After those words, he looked at her resume again with surprise and then examined the young woman up and down. Suddenly, he was glad that a young girl wanted to work there, because usually they avoided it at all costs. His lustful gaze swept over her body instantly, and he concluded that his men would finally find motivation. Soryun surprised him by asking if there were many dangers there, since most were soldiers. He tried to say there would be many wanting to protect her, but she only replied that he should shut up. When the interview ended, the young woman didn't even notice passing the man and answered Chana's call. As if nothing, she recounted that she had passed the interview, without imagining what kind of person she had just left behind. A month had passed since So Ryan started working as a cleaner at the Blast office. Her colleague, with a smile, urged her to be faster, as there was one table left unattended. The girl calmly resumed her duties, removing a cart of remains worthy of a swamp. She had barely taken a few steps. She heard male voices debating a position in a special group. So Rai-young mentally paid attention to the words about the security handled by that special group. Furthermore, one of the men spoke fervently about the new boss, about whom there were very murky rumors. He described him dominating his subordinates, as if he already had them all under his boot. So Rai-young mentally clung to those words. Like a predator to its prey. She was interested in that security group. Not long before this, she had met with Chana, who wanted to know more details about her job. She unintentionally recalled her friend's questions. If she liked her job. If she felt good there. The girl asked about her colleagues. Sure, they would fall head over heels for her beauty instantly. So Ryan withdrew her hand and asked where she worked. Since lately she hardly saw her. Chana, surprised, hesitated, not knowing what to answer. She didn't want to reveal details about her job. Exhausted, she turned her face and added that she could only say that her new boss was a complete idiot. Thanks to that casual comment, The girl supposed that Chana might be in a special group. She still didn't understand why it was so difficult to know anything about the special group's work. As soon as she suspected how jealously they guarded their work. When she heard nearby shouts, a burly man lunged at his interlocutor, venting all his fury and dissatisfaction. A grimace of fierce anger appeared on his face, demanding he repeat what he had just said. The other guy said he was irritated that he always kept quiet when the special group was mentioned. When he longed to join, the man wanted to hit him, yelling at him for daring to attack him as if he envied him, and feared being left alone. So Ryan was hallucinating about the frequency of their arguments, as if they had nothing better to do. Immediately afterward, her attention focused on the terrified employee right in the middle of the hurricane. She was carrying a tray, and at the last second, saw how two human masses lunged at her. On the ground, she got up as best she could, feeling a sharp pain in her already fragile body. The old woman complained about her back, but the enraged agents didn't even register her. So Ryan felt the pressure, not knowing how to act. Every decision was a bomb about to explode. Suddenly, she blurted out that she had to mop the floor and quickly left with the cart, leaving everyone wide-eyed. The girl was heading straight to run over the contenders. They only saw her appear at the last second. The big guy saw that she was charging with a giant soup tureen and tried to stop her by asking what she was doing. But before reacting, the soup tureen flew off, splashing soup everywhere. The man was so shocked by such audacity that he was speechless. He tried to insult her, but so Ryan coldly reminded him that his lunch break was over. Immediately after this incident, she found herself in the manager's office, where they scolded her for her action and the chaos. He pointed his finger at her and told her that, although she never had manners or fear, this was too much. The man explained that this company houses combat operatives, and they are just personnel organizing their lives. As soon as he mentioned that they should check Mrs. Kim's back, he hissed that she doesn't know how to prioritize. He also added that the big guy who fought has a very explosive temper and is now very angry with her. After being ordered not to bother him for now, the girl walked away dejectedly from his office. She carried a towel on her head, as shortly before this conversation, she had also gotten soup stains on herself. Upon reaching the elevator, she inevitably wondered how she could kidnap someone with this attitude from her boss. So Ryan began plotting other ways to achieve her goal, but found no better job. As soon as the elevator doors opened, men in suits appeared in front of her. She felt a threat coming from the man in the elevator and decided to take the next one. He was stunned to find his former target right where she now works. Although his face was hidden behind the towel, her entire being felt that it was her. He wanted to wait for her to go together. But she missed the elevator and looked at him in the end. So Rajan examined her thoughtful yet serene face, which for some reason unsettled him. He observed her for long seconds, until the elevator closed and left, waiting for the next one. Surrounded by employees, she overheard fragments of their words and strained her ear attentively. They furiously criticized the new boss, hated by everyone, and the rumors of his stay in Africa. The employees couldn't believe he was only 31 years old, considering what he struggled with after reaching adulthood. And then in the special forces. So Ryan quickly recalled the words of those furious men and concluded that he was the new boss. His imposing figure appeared before her, as if he couldn't believe that detestable boss was him. After that, the girl returned to her duties, where a resentful soldier took it out on her mercilessly. He demanded again and again that she wash his clothes, saying they still reeked of the scraps she had thrown on him. The girl, unperturbed, took the garment and said she had already washed it more than 20 times this week. As soon as he asked with disgust if she knew who he was, she calmly replied that his name was embroidered on his uniform. To her surprise, he just smiled smugly and asked if she had always been so boring. He demanded she stop staring at him, even though he himself was examining her with a lustful gaze. The man criticized her for the penetrating way she looked at him, thinking he might interest her. Despite the possible threat, so Ryan coldly asked him if he wanted to sleep with her. Disarmed, the man smiled mischievously and asked, thoughtfully, what kind of person she was. So Ryan stared him straight in the eye, just as he asked if she knew anything about Confucianism. The agent held his breath after hearing her say, without the slightest hint of shame. That wasn't the point. He loomed threateningly over the young woman and asked her what the problem was with having just one sexual encounter with him. The man expected her to back down and keep quiet after his words. But she only apologized firmly and said she didn't sleep with just anyone. She thoughtfully began to list the parameters of her ex-husband, saying that height had to be over 188 and weight under 80. Her aggressor couldn't contain his surprise when she started talking about exactly what his reproductive organ should be like. He froze like a primitive animal and began to cover his fly when she said her husband's was like that. At first, his mind was blinded by lust, until he grasped the true meaning of what she was telling him. He jumped up, furious, and pointed his finger at her, reproaching her for not mentioning her husband. So Ryan ignored his question, so he demanded she stop looking at him and pick up her shower pass. Like a soldier, the girl nodded at his words and said she understood everything, and then headed for the exit. In the end, she stopped and turned around, just as her unpleasant interlocutor called her again. Her cheeks were flushed as she asked again, indignant, if she really had a husband. So Raijun was stunned to see his offended and confused face, as if he were talking to a teenager. Mentally calling him a complete idiot, she pulled up her mask and left, leaving him without any answer. Leaving him alone, the girl walked quickly to the shower where she had forgotten her pass while washing. Exhausted after the experience, she looked down at the floor and thought she would rather flee to North Korea 100 times more. So Ryan was so absorbed in her thoughts that she didn't even notice the man showering in a stall. As if nothing, he kept showering, until she shouted asking if there was anyone in the shower. The man stopped surprised and cursed, not understanding who could be there at that hour. Seeing the girl in front of him, he asked with a smug smile if she wanted to shower with him, provoking her indignation. With a cunning smile, she looked around and told him he better leave quickly, because the other guys would arrive soon. So Ryan kept her head down until she accidentally noticed a tattoo on his thigh. With astonishment, she began to examine the phrase written right near his groin, which caused her bewilderment. The head of the special unit seemed to notice this on purpose and called her shameless, as if he wasn't looking at the tattoo. To his surprise, she continued intently observing his intimate area, which at first amused him. However, he was even more surprised to notice her demented and absorbed gaze, as if she had found something. Suddenly, he realized that the same girl was in front of him and furiously ripped the mask from her face. Rage distorted his face, such intense fury that he shouted, "Owl!" He squeezed the mask he snatched with such force that his fists trembled with indignation. The boss stared her straight in the eye and asked bluntly what she was doing there, without any filter. "It seems you forgot you were completely naked," and continued demanding an answer. Sensing danger, Sora Young apologized for bothering him and assured him she would leave immediately. He wanted to stop her, but he heard the other agents entering the shower. As he had warned her, one of the men asked Sun Wukshan if it was true that he had shouted at the cleaner today. Meanwhile, Li Wuzin kept cornering the girl, covering her with his body as the men entered. She tried to get him to move, but he, preoccupied, only said he needed to think. "What tension?" So Ray Young wanted to reply, but he looked her in the eyes again and asked, "What are you doing here?" Meanwhile, the others noticed a forgotten pass in the showers, completely angering Sonuk Chen. They didn't even imagine that their boss was trying to find out what his former obsession was plotting in the company. She confidently stated that she cooked and washed, and that it wasn't his business to stop her for that. She added that seeing naked fighters wouldn't scare her, but she was displeased by what had happened between them. So Rian tried to wriggle free, asking him to move away. But he forced her to press against his back again. An accidental brush with his shirt was enough for her to notice the obvious change in his member. She couldn't believe what she was seeing, noticing the astonishing similarity to that of her very own husband. The girl struggled to break free, demanding he let her go. But only the tap water stopped him. Taking advantage of his confusion, she escaped as fast as she could, leaving everything behind. Everything was so fast that even Lee Woo-sing didn't know how to react to his body's unexpected response. Something in her fixed gaze disturbed him. He even felt a strange excitement. A while later, he contacted his hacker, who immediately questioned him about Blast. Lee Woo-sing ignored his question and straight to the point, asked about Buo, leaving him stunned. He was so astonished that he started bombarding him with questions about her. And his boss reprimanded him. Lee Woo-seong asked him if he had grown fond of the target, thinking how such an idiot dreams of a salary. Only after a volley of insults did the employee find information in the database about a newly hired girl. He quickly read the public data of the 27-year-old girl employed in the supplies department. Then he became distressed, thinking if she had recognized him, even though she wasn't wearing his mask or the voice modulator. Receiving no answer, he suddenly asked if she had suffered physical harm, which amused his superior. As soon as he heard a sharp reply, he reminded him of his own words. He had demanded that he not inform him about her. In an instant, he left him speechless, revealing that not long ago, she had tried to flee to North Korea. Furthermore, he accused him of being a spy like Kim Hyun, and as he tried to escape, demanded that he be investigated. Lee Woo-sing was stunned to learn that his wife, previously so calm, had done such a thing. And even talked about him. Before, she had always seemed like a lonely and kind girl, incapable of even considering something like that in real life. She was the type of person who, without complaining, was willing to live her monotonous life. And boring. Throughout all their years of living together, she behaved like the most tender, calm one. And obedient one he could have ever imagined. In disbelief that she could be like this, he demanded the hacker find out everything about her to get rid of her later. The day after the last incident, Seo Ryan began carrying out her work duties as usual. She was still thinking about yesterday's altercation with her boss, who was indignant about her habit of staring intensely at people. She was surprised that, although she hadn't seen her husband, she looked directly at that guy's equipment upon regaining sight. She remembered the pervert's body in detail and noticed that his thing was just as curved as her husband's. A memory invaded her, her touching her husband's member, who called that peculiarity his biggest complex. On those nights together, he stroked her hands, confessing that his was not the normal shape everyone expected. Then he kissed her, not without first apologizing, ashamed of possessing that particular anatomy. Let's say. She was so absorbed in those pleasant memories that she barely heard when they called her. Her colleague left a couple of bags on the table, asking her to take lunch to the construction site. So Ryan still couldn't hide the blush on her cheeks, while the woman kept talking about the employees. Despite the coincidences between her husband and the boss, she saw that he was not like Kim Hyun. Composing herself, the young woman set out to fulfill the errand and changed to deliver the food. As soon as she heard the familiar voice of that hateful man, she rolled her eyes in annoyance. As if nothing, he was next to the car with his arms crossed, demanding she get in now. Lee Woo-sing seemed to enjoy being able to mock her. He even said that the employees were hungry. As soon as she got in the car, they sped off to the construction site. Something that, obviously, she didn't like at all. She was also surprised that after the incident in the shower, he now spoke to her as if they were intimate. After this, the girl reflected on the rumors and concluded that they were not a coincidence. It seems that So Ryan became so lost in her thoughts that she even unsettled Lee Woo-sing behind the wheel. Suddenly, he decided to break the awkward silence by asking her how her current job was going. After a brief response, he asked if she knew Young-pil Jae, from whom she had received a recommendation. She resisted answering. Then he informed her that due to an injury, there was a vacancy on his team. He hinted at the possibility of applying for the position and warned her that the more sincere she was, the better. Lee Woo-sing, with a cunning smile, opened a lollipop and said that, if he understood correctly, she was asking for cooperation. Seo Ryong doubted his words and thought if he was threatening to take her on a trip if she didn't answer. Seeing her doubt, the boss demanded she not waste time, after which she briefly replied that they knew each other a little. The man cunningly pointed out that she personally knew a man with a wife and children. The girl couldn't hide her growing indignation when he asked about her fondness for married men. She, deliberately loud, asked him if he thought about and understood what he was asking. Given her subtle insinuation, he enthusiastically replied that since she answered briefly, he would also express his thoughts briefly. Seo Ryung kept glaring at him when he asked if she wanted him to shorten them even more. Only then did the girl reluctantly say that she didn't know Jong Pilju that well. But his little assistant. She was visibly surprised when he unexpectedly said that Ho Chana was a very talented hacker. Lee Woo-seong recounted how, in 2016, the National Bank of Bangladesh almost lost $1 billion due to a hacker attack. And guess who was behind all this? None other than the North Korean government and a 16-year-old girl. Then, with a cunning smile, he asked her how she met that goldmine, clearly insinuating Ho Chan-woo. Seo Ryun, reluctant to reveal secrets, counterattacked by asking if she was supposed to tell him her personal life. Despite her silence, Lee Woo-seong insisted on knowing, asking if it was such a big secret. And unconfessable. She froze upon hearing him suddenly ask if she was asking him to obtain personal data illegally. The man, seeking the climax of the conversation, sentenced that if she didn't cooperate, he would be direct and straightforward. He dropped the bomb. He said he was making a list for an overseas mission and that she shouldn't go if she was faint-hearted. Seeing her bewilderment, he finished by saying that no matter how much it disgusted him, he had to satisfy his curiosity so she wouldn't suffer on that mission. After his words, the girl was stunned, fearing that something terrible might happen to her if she traveled with them. The man didn't understand that he was only arousing her interest more and threatened to fire her if she didn't answer obediently. Aware that she had to get in there at all costs to capture the NCI's attention, she decided not to play his game. Suddenly, with obvious mockery, he let slip that the NCI was too weak to even try to recruit Ho Chana. So Ryan suggested that the NCI failed in recruitment due to its own incompetence, seeking to provoke his anger. After her words, Lee Woo-seong looked away thoughtfully and asked if it was true that all her money had been taken. The young woman looked ahead determinedly and replied that something more valuable had been taken from her, since it's not just money that is lost. As soon as she asked if that's why Ho Chan caught the criminal, she questioned him if he wanted to help her get revenge. He vaguely intuited which person she was referring to and assumed she hadn't managed to catch him yet. It seems her words about how much she despised him managed to spark a slight interest in the girl. She, with a smug smile, said she didn't even know if she despised him, as she was still looking for him. Lee Woo-seong darkened upon hearing her say she wouldn't give up, even if it took her months or years. Finally, and quite seriously, he sentenced that he didn't regret it and that it was too early to ask for mercy. After a short pause, the boss declared that if she didn't understand she was wasting time, it meant she had run into the wrong guy. About to reach their destination, Seo Ryung counterattacked by saying that he was the one who had run into her, since they would meet anyway. The young woman froze when she felt the car stop and looked at him when he confessed that he hadn't introduced himself yet. The man, with a cunning look, observed the young woman and introduced himself as Lee Woo-seong, head of the Special Security Service. After those words, the young woman went on alone, as he warned her of the danger due to the demonstration. And he would stay inside. She decided to complete the mission as quickly as possible, while silently criticizing him for being such an annoying person. Despite the tense conversation, her mind only thought of the opportunity to get an overseas mission. She was so absorbed in how to find an assistant that she saw the man at the last second. The smiling man took the bags from her hands and sincerely thanked her for delivering the lunches. He quickly moved away from the girl and with a smile wished her a good trip back. However, the girl suddenly noticed that this place smelled the same as her husband, Kim Hyun. Seo Hyun became so immersed in that painfully familiar scent that she even drew the attention of the man who took the bags. The pain of separation and anguish overwhelmed her so much that she involuntarily followed the man. which greatly surprised him. The very next instant, as if hypnotized, she looked at the man and begged him to let her watch him eat. Realizing that her words sounded strange, she asked if they had a good appetite. But he replied that it was dangerous there. He warned her that they were undercover to dismantle the syndicate and suggested she leave him her number. Obeying a kind of inner calling. So Ryan even thought it could be her husband, but immediately reacted. She looked closely at the man again and noticed that he was quite robustly built. And different from her husband. After that brief analysis, she turned around instantly and rejected him, wishing him a good meal as a farewell. Every time she assessed how much she missed Kim Hyun, a deep feeling of humiliation grew inside her. And grievance. Her soul was torn by opposing emotions, as she wanted to kill him with the same intensity she longed for him. As soon as she returned, her boss, visibly annoyed, stopped her to question her about whether she knew that man. She tried to recall his words about waiting for her in the car, but he only commented that it was very curious. Well. Lee Wuxing decided to mock her, saying he didn't even understand if she had delivered a meal. Or a person. With a smug smile, he asked who she was looking at with such appetite. But her indignation knew no bounds. Her indifferent gaze, with glints of unhealthy pleasure, continued to exhaust her patience, bringing her to the limit. Since Kim Hyun's disappearance, stress had been building up in her body so rapidly that it threatened to overflow. Although she knew it was just a way to release tension, she told her boss she was looking because she missed him. So Ryan, with tears in her eyes, said she followed a scent she liked and added that there was nothing wrong with it. As soon as he questioned her, she immediately left, saying it was a scent that could drive you crazy. He quickly began analyzing her words about the scent, reaching a shocking conclusion. Apparently, it shocked her even more when he asked if she was consuming marijuana. His untimely and unrealistic question surprised her so much that she became completely paralyzed. Immediately afterward, she quickly got up and said she wouldn't indulge him, so she was leaving for a business trip. Before she could answer, a chicken egg unexpectedly smashed against her back. Thrown from behind. He didn't see everything that had accumulated behind him, which had so surprised Sorian. A crowd of workers was quickly approaching, assuming they were coming from the central office. Sensing the imminent threat, Sorian strongly pulled the edge of his jacket and demanded he start the car quickly. Despite the fury of so many men, he insisted on asking her whether or not she was consuming. He argued that she stared intensely at everyone and they couldn't take a drug addict along. Li Wuzhang ignored her pleas to open the car and asked what smell made her tremble like that. He couldn't hide his astonishment and froze when she said she had smelled her husband. Seo Rui-young looked for the car keys and scolded him for doing nothing until she noticed his hand. Calmly, Li Wuxiong smashed the chicken face onto his fist and decided to give his opinion on the situation. He found it strange that she decided to follow a stranger just for a simple smell. He contemptuously said it was just the stench of cheap mail and added that he didn't trust perverted employees. To his surprise, she confidently stated that her husband was unique in the world. And his smell wasn't unpleasant. Li Wuxiong didn't understand why she was still so obsessed, even after his disappearance. And betrayal. After a thoughtful pause, he concluded that it was better if Ms. Han Sorian wasn't there. The boss ignored the eggs being thrown at them and ordered her to pack for a business trip. Days later, they found themselves in Bangkok, where they had to protect an important fugitive drug trafficker. Sorian's colleague asked her if she liked money, and upon receiving a negative answer, he assumed she would quit. He explained that usually, those who don't care much about money turn pale and flee when they see cruelty. To her surprise, so Ryan didn't react and said she needed to clean, so he asked her if she wasn't afraid. The girl was noticeably amused by his negative reaction, which made her smile, and called him a goldmine. She mentally repeated his words and said she was so valuable that even the National Intelligence Service would be delighted. Encouraged by these thoughts, so Ryan moved forward and wondered if the company was worse than she thought. Despite many confusing ideas, she still began to carry out her usual duties. As if nothing, she was dusting, when a voice behind her interrupted her by asking if she signed the secret contract. Silently, she turned her head and saw Li Wusing, the man who dragged her into this dangerous adventure. After thinking for a moment, she calmly turned back and concisely replied that she had. That she signed the secret contract. Suddenly, Li Wuxin smiled slyly and asked her why she was still there, knowing what the job was about. He positioned himself behind her and asked why she was rolling around in the dust, considering the dirty work done there. At that moment, So Ryung remained kneeling, trying to clean the dust, not expecting such closeness with her boss. With complete naturalness, she pointed to the rag and said she was cleaning because of the lack of hygiene that reigned in that place. The young woman observed with secret interest the change in her boss's expression, who apparently expected a different answer. She enjoyed mentally noticing how much her answer bothered him, as he clearly expected a different reaction. Li Wuxin, exhausted, held his head and reprimanded her, telling her she was there to help with crimes. He also added that she is there to cook for the villains, who collect weapons to protect the drug traffickers. He barely stated that, if necessary, they lead people to death. She replied, annoyed, that he was the one who brought her here. It seems Li Wusung caught her negativity and asked again if she really wanted to clean such a place. He kept pressuring her, demanding an answer to such a simple question, something she clearly did not want to do. So Young also didn't fully understand her true mission on this assignment, so answering was very difficult for her. Noticing the girl's silence, Li Wusung smiled and said he only scared her a little, and that she should do everything as usual. After this sentence, he calmly turned around, feeling the girl still glaring at him, insulting him mentally. So Young remained sitting on the floor, thinking that no matter how many times she met him, talking was very unpleasant for her. She understood that life in current society was very difficult for her, but at the same time, she admired the importance of Li Wusong. Now she knew he was a real find for national intelligence, which is why she finally agreed with him. Realizing she no longer wanted to avoid him, she asked what she would prepare for him in the morning. The next day, as if nothing had happened, she went for a walk around with her friend Hacker. The active girl observed the local food stalls with visible enthusiasm, while So Ryan accompanied her. Suddenly, she called Chana and coldly confessed that she really enjoyed her company. Despite the dangerous people, Chana was astonished when she added that the environment and the irritating colleagues inspired her. After these words, So Ryan mysteriously thought if her husband, a national intelligence agent, would be horrified. Chana suddenly called her a little devil and told her she had such a terrifying smile that it sent shivers down the spine. The girl indignantly put her hand to her forehead and asked what was so good about her husband that she kept thinking about him. To her surprise, Soryan calmly said that every moment she had spent with her husband had been happy and meaningful. She squeezed her hand somewhat firmly, saying that sometimes she felt his presence, even though she couldn't see him. Chana sentenced her, dictating that it was better to live with suspicion towards everything and everyone who tries to seduce her. So Ryan was so absorbed in their chat that she was slow to notice the little girl waving at her. The little girl looked at So Ryan with a smile, offering her a bag of bracelets and telling her she was beautiful. She only thoughtfully asked Chana how she should react when told she is beautiful. Following the response to tell her to go play, she took the bracelet woven by the girl and praised it. Suddenly, she felt a strange sensation, as if an unknown threat was about to strike them. Apparently, she was the only one who noticed something strange and ran forward at full speed, pulling her friend. She clearly didn't understand the reason for the girl's panic, as if she suddenly felt unwell. Despite attempts to stop her, So Ryan continued to hold the young woman's hand tightly and guiding her. She briefly explained that she was fine and that her reaction was because she had a bad feeling. Shortly before this incident, he demanded that Chana perform an exhaustive hacking review. Li Wuxiang carefully observed her actions and validated the work when she said everything was clean. To her surprise, he suddenly revealed that he had overheard her helping Hanser Young dig up information about the man who took her money. As soon as she said she hadn't done anything wrong, he replied that this was precisely what they were doing right now. The girl looked at her boss suspiciously, as if wishing he would explain his statement in more detail. Lee Woo-seong concluded that they were now protecting the leader of a drug cartel and securing escape routes in case of danger. Furthermore, they were also infiltrating the homes of his subordinates, after which he asked if these were not bad deeds. Suddenly, Lee Woo-seong spoke thoughtfully about how all this, in any case, should impact a normal person. By saying this, he was thinking of that conversation with So Ryung, who didn't even blink when he explained the essence of the job. He invited her on a business trip so that she would immerse herself in a world where morals don't matter and leave the company on her own. Before in marriage, she was weak and anxious, which gave him an advantage. He believed he could easily manipulate her, as always, but he was completely wrong. After several clashes, Lee Woo-seong noticed that she was only sweet to Kim Hyun. Because of this crucial question, Chana sensed that he might know everything. But she was surprised when he asked if Seo Ryung drank, given her calmness. After that, she became convinced that he knew her motive, what drives the girl. It was unacceptable that he knew what made her act so brave and loyal. Chana understood that, knowing her sister's plans, he would prevent it. Now, he wondered why Seo Ryung was helping those villains. Suddenly he thought that the guy who fled with the money was not trash. After thinking for a while, Chana coldly said she never imagined someone could sink so low. Lee Woo-seong observed her with interest when she commented that Seo Ryung hung out with a despicable guy. Suddenly, he clenched his fist in fury and spoke of how much his sister suffered because of that scoundrel, and that she wanted revenge. After releasing his anger, he sentenced that if he ever found him, he would rip his guts out without a second's hesitation. Demanding that she ask no more, Chana added that this was precisely why she had brought So Ryung to his company. She suddenly added that the main reason was that there were many men in the company with whom she could talk. Then, she turned around surprised and looked at Lee Woo-seong, who apparently finally understood that it was about her. The boss curtly said she could leave, which suddenly made the girl feel strange. Very uncomfortable. Apparently, he didn't suspect that the infamous man was in front of her, and she calmed down, thinking that nothing would happen. Without delay, she left her boss, wishing to prepare a delicious spicy ramen with So Ryung as soon as possible. Guided by a simple desire to help, she didn't imagine the fury she would unleash in Lee Woo-seong. After that meeting, he went straight to the girl's house, where he treated her to delicious food. Satisfied to bursting, she enjoyed how good it felt to eat ramen after a hard day. Chana replied, because the other agents weren't back, and asked about her relationship with Gu-jin. So Ryan froze, thinking what to answer, given her tense differences with him. Chana changed the subject and thought her little sister would never do anything to that creep. Believing they didn't even know each other, she said she would wash the dishes so Ryan could rest. After hearing her, So Ryun left the house and felt her unease grow upon hearing Chana ask for trust. To her astonishment, she smelled perfume on the stairs, which only intensified her suspicions. She compared the scent and concluded that none of her agents used that type of fragrance. It seemed her suspicions were instantly confirmed upon noticing a pool of blood on the floor. The girl couldn't contain the fear that invaded her upon seeing the bloody body right in the hallway of her house. She quickly scanned the man's body, feeling that her possible murderer might still be there. Immediately, a slightly open door at the end of the hallway caught her attention, and she decided to enter to check. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Another bloody body in the room, as if there had been a massacre. So Ryung tried to sort out her thoughts and understand what had happened in the absence of the others. She instantly noticed there were no signs of struggle or resistance, and the blow was directed to a vital point, thinking about who could let their guard down at this hour. So Ryung began to worry. For her friend Chana, she ran back as fast as she could but slipped on a pool of blood and fell hard on her hip. Suddenly, she looked at the body in horror and saw an earpiece in her ear connecting the agents to Lee Woo-seong. She was terrified to touch the deceased's body, but knew she had no choice to survive. She prayed silently to be able to contact him, and with a lump in her throat, she said everyone was dead. So Ryan tried to calmly report that everyone was dead, but every word cost her dearly. It seems she managed to contact Lee Wuxin. He pressed the accelerator harder in the car. Upon hearing his voice respond, the girl managed to say that all the employees on the floors were dead. Lee Wuxin demanded that she calm down. Then she said everyone was dead, without blood or resistance. Finally, she added that she smelled a strong perfume scent, and the murderer might be in the hotel. Chana is in danger. So Ryan couldn't contain the terror that flooded her when he declared that, in that case, Ho Chana would surely die. He calmly added that she would also be killed soon because they leave no witnesses. And she wouldn't be able to resist. Lee Wuxin demanded that she calm down and take the gun from one of the guys, to hold out as long as possible. With difficulty, So Ryun reached for the gun and briefly added that she had found a car. She couldn't hide her fear when he coldly told her to abandon Ho Chanu and leave there as soon as possible. The young woman couldn't believe that, to survive, she would have to abandon her friend, who had done so much for her. Lee Wuxing insisted that she follow his instructions, since in such a situation, there is no time to hesitate. As soon as she repeated to abandon Chanu and leave the hotel, she understood that everything was his orders. Suddenly, she raised the weapon and felt her guilt receding, making way for something new. Soryan suddenly raised her eyes, full of confusion, as if not understanding where these feelings came from. Unexpectedly, she discovered in front of her the ghost of her beloved husband, who looked at her with a sweet and serene smile. For some reason, she felt that the orders were not given by Lee Wuxing, but by her husband, whom she had never wanted to contradict before. Finally, with full resolution, she gritted her teeth and promised that, no matter what, she would not abandon Ho Chanyu. Lee Wuxing froze in astonishment upon hearing her shout that she wouldn't abandon him and that she would tell her husband what her feelings were. And her choice. She ran quickly towards the exit, repeating incessantly that she couldn't abandon anyone, and much less Chana. For some reason, she was again absorbed in thoughts about what compelling reasons Kim Hyun might have had for leaving her. After telling Lee Wuxing that she would be the first to survive such madness, she returned to the kitchen, where Chana was. She carefully observed any indication that might signal imminent danger. Her gaze was immediately caught by a small pool of blood under the kitchen seats. At that moment, a multitude of fears flooded her, which were confirmed when she approached the table. To her misfortune, she noticed that her friend had a serious wound in the neck area. But she still showed vital signs. Despite the intense pain she felt, she still tried to maintain at least some wisps of consciousness. She begged Soryan for help, who leaned towards her, thinking about what she should do to save her friend's life. The girl conveyed to Lee Wuxin that Chana's throat was cut, and Chana is in critical condition. Given the amount of blood, she immediately answered the boss's question and reported that they were currently in the common kitchen. The man ordered her to press her hands against the girl's neck and not remove them under any circumstances, or she would die. He assumed that she might be the main target, and his mistake was not considering that she was an important specialist from North Korea. It seems the hacker had been monitored since she left the country, which allowed them to plan everything well. He also said this might only be the beginning, as they left her alive to claim the body later. So Ryan couldn't believe what she heard, that they were going to torture Chana that way to recruit her. Or interrogate her. As soon as he finished saying that mercenaries would arrive soon, she heard the sound of heels approaching. The girl freed one hand, listening intently to the person approaching behind the room door. So Ryan tried to remain calm and hinted to Lee Wuxin about the arrival of that same murderer. She also said they might discover her soon, and she had to do something quickly. The boss briefly told her to load the gun, cock it, and prepare to aim. He said he was almost there, and added not to panic and to pull the trigger a second time if she missed. He added that even if she died, she would shoot once to instantly recognize that bastard. Afterward, the girl only thought about how to handle the gun with one hand, given her position. Seeing Chana's face, shattered by pain, she promised herself that this time she would help her. Thinking that something would occur to her if the murderer returned, she followed the boss's instructions. She held the pistol with her teeth, praying mentally that everything would turn out well, that she could handle the weapon. Her heart beat even faster upon hearing the footsteps of the potential murderer approaching. Just as he reached the door, Lee Woo-sing instantly told her not to move. She should have pulled the trigger instantly, but she couldn't help being amazed upon seeing that the murderer was a woman. Reacting to the boss's shout, she tried to pull the trigger, but the gun slipped from her hands. To her misfortune, she fell so hard on the floor that she rolled right to her enemy's feet, the one she had to take down. Her murderer instantly smiled viciously and stared fixedly at the girl, causing a shiver to run down her spine. Lee Woo-sing sensed immediately that something was wrong and approached her to hear a response. He shouted loudly, demanding she say something. But she remained tensely silent, feeling death approaching. As soon as the earpiece fell from her ear, the woman crushed it with her heel, depriving her of all communication. In her hand, a blade gleamed from which dripped the blood of all those she had wounded that day. So Ryung continued to grip Chana's throat with all her might, watching the woman slowly approach. The girl assessed her chances in an instant and understood that she could not let go of Chana's throat, or she would die instantly. Immediately afterward, she looked at the murderer and felt a piercing fear from his gaze. She immediately connected the dots. The agents were dead, without resistance. A crucial detail. The strong perfume scent, which seemed to emanate directly from that woman, bothered her. Instantly, she remembered the street prostitutes, attracting tourists in tiny tops and shorts. Suddenly, the girl felt the urgent call of her survival instinct, despite years of blindness. She reacted so quickly and instinctively that the murderer couldn't even react upon seeing the weapon. With disgust, So Ryan cursed, revealing to him that she wasn't a woman, but a man in disguise. For some reason, she still didn't pull the trigger, watching the one who had been stalking them, disguised as a prostitute. Her words delighted the opponent, who, pleased, brandished his knife with a bloodthirsty gaze. He couldn't even react, as So Ryan hit him hard in the groin, confirming her theory. It seems her blow was so strong that the murderer fell to the ground, trying to endure the pain. Taking advantage of the moment, So Ryung cocked the pistol with all her might and prepared her revenge. Immediately afterward, she shot without hesitation, hitting exactly the target that had caused so much trouble. So Ryung's shot was accurate, fatal. The murderer rolled his eyes, bidding life farewell instantly. Realizing that she had finally dealt with the danger, the young woman smiled and commented on how difficult that weapon was. Finally, dawn broke, and with the sunrise, the rest of the group members arrived at the hotel, including Lee Woo-shin. They were surprised to see that they were still in the exact same place where So Ryung had fainted after her first shot. Lee Woo-shin quickly noticed that, even while asleep, she was still clutching her friend's neck without letting go. Another man pointed out that it was a man disguised as a woman, as all his sexual organs were destroyed. Lee Woo-shin froze when his agent suggested that So Ryung might have been responsible for that. He looked at the girl again, not believing she could have done all that, given her calm nature. Before his eyes appeared that pure and tender woman, who used to look at him like her beloved husband. Suddenly he understood that neither he, nor his former self, ever knew the strange person she had become. After the night incident, the girl appeared in the hospital room, where Lee Woo-shin was sitting beside her. To her surprise, So Ryan didn't manage to open her eyes when she jumped out of bed, examining her body. Astonished. Suddenly, with a malicious smile, she clenched her hands and supposed it must hurt a lot. Then, she said she deserved it. The man added that he was only there to see her face, which looked like a grimace of pain. So Ryan was indignant at his behavior, so she demanded that he explain why he was speaking like that. She added that, although her hand had turned into a rag, she should be congratulated for not dying and answer her questions. As soon as she said she could ask any question, she remembered her friend. Tortured by the pain, the image of her face in the pool of blood still tormented her incessantly. Lee Woo-sung seemed to guess her thoughts and informed her that Ho Chana was in the ICU. The boss, exhausted, rubbed his head, confirming she was still alive but still unconscious. Which was terrible. She was rushed into emergency surgery right there, but the blood loss was worse than they imagined. Unfortunately, her heart stopped on the verge of death twice. Her life hung by a thread. So Ryong was surprised to learn she didn't wake up until a week later. He warned her that, with that injury, it would be difficult to work, and suggested calling her husband. His cynical words spurred her to insult him, but he noticed she wasn't even on his contact list. After this, Lee Bu-sung prepared to leave and smiled, doubting that he was her real husband. His arrogance left So Ryong speechless, unable to reply. She looked away and said that if he came to destroy her, he had succeeded and could leave. Just as she was saying goodbye, he suddenly asked her what she had put in her mouth to hurt her gums like that. Suddenly, So Ryun touched her wounded lips, thoughtfully recalling the cause of those injuries. She explained that she lacked hands to prepare the weapon. That's why she tried with her mouth, to do something. It seems her words about the crisis and her methods got on the man's nerves. And the veins swelled on his face. He approached furiously, telling her what would have happened if a novice had loaded the gun incorrectly. The man thoughtfully pointed to his own mouth and affirmed that, if so, everything inside her would have exploded. To her surprise, Saryan felt no fear and replied that since nothing exploded, everything was fine. After those words, with a forced smile, he ruffled her hair and asked if her husband knew what she was really like. He said she was ignorant, stubborn, and completely crazy, although she pretended to be fair and intelligent. It seems Saryan didn't react to his words, as her face maintained the same expression. After a short pause, the girl impassively said that, of course, her husband didn't know that side of her. Immediately after, she added that seeing her face was enough for her husband, and he didn't need to know such trifles. She also added that she didn't save Chana out of righteousness, but because she wished to condemn her husband even more. So Ryan wanted to prove that both he and her husband were wrong, and that you don't abandon people, no matter what. After saying this, the girl lowered her gaze and assured him that everything was calculated. And that nobility did not move her at all. It seemed her words sounded so incompatible with his previous idea of her that he was left speechless. He remained thoughtful by the bed until she expressed her gratitude for the help provided. She meant that without him she would have died, and that she wouldn't have done anything alone. But Lee Woo-jin interrupted her. Suddenly, the man leaned over her and told her that he was the one who should thank her for being able to get rid of her. He added that he would achieve it thanks to her refusal to follow orders. And then he squeezed her neck. Libushin looked her in the eyes suddenly and told her that she, being a civilian, had shot and killed someone. He added that, even if the company helped and concealed it, he doubted she could forget what she had done. The boss wanted her to resign on her own and suggested she return to her normal life. By saying this, he insisted she do it and take advantage of his last act of kindness. To conclude, he added that he saw no use in people like her, as he needed those who could easily abandon and turn their backs. He also said that he found it unpleasant to see Hans Orion, who did nothing but ramble. After saying this, he paused briefly, as if wanting to dissuade her at all costs. Precisely because of this, he smiled falsely and proposed that they never see each other again if she understood correctly. After that conversation, several days passed during which Saryan remained in the hospital, recovering from her injuries. She still felt the weight of being fired, so she decided to visit Jachana. She remained by her injured friend's bedside and quietly told her that she had been fired. So Ryan knew no one would answer, but she wanted to share it with the one who helped her from the start. Behind her appeared an unknown old man, pointing out that, despite everything, her gaze was determined. The girl immediately asked him cautiously who he was, not understanding why he was talking to her. The man leaned on his cane, adorned with a hawk, and said he had a great debt to her. Suddenly, with a humble smile, he introduced himself as the CEO of the Blast Company, where she worked. He told her his name was Kang Ti-gong, while the girl still stood before him, dumbfounded. The man sat on the sofa and said he was coming to visit her in the hospital. But she saved him the trip. So Ryan couldn't believe that the CEO himself was telling her this, thanking her for saving Chana. She listened intently to every word he said, as he spoke of how difficult it was to attract such valuable talent to the company. He added that it terrified him to think that she might have died at the hands of assassins in Thailand and suffer huge losses. Kang Tae-gong added that without her, it was impossible to close many contracts, and then asked if Lee Boo-seung had told her to leave. She immediately remembered that harsh moment in the hotel when he first ordered her to abandon Ho Chan-yu and save herself. Apparently, the girl couldn't understand the reason why he told her to abandon someone so important to the company. Even though he said she wasn't useful, he decided to save her anyway and not Chan-yu. What an irony. Noticing her bewilderment, the general manager told her that he had come to express his gratitude. With a smile, he assured her that although the company would pay compensation, he wanted to thank her personally. A week later, Lee Woo-seong began a new mission in Nigeria, where they were at a police training camp. He, as if nothing had happened, was lying on the deck chair, observing how cloudy the sky was that day. A man happened upon a small cloud that reminded him of an owl with big eyes. He kept watching the cloud, not understanding why. Even in that situation, he kept thinking about that owl. He seemed irritated that his thoughts were occupied by that insistent girl. Until they called him. The agent, indignant, approached his commander decisively and asked if he had seen the new order. Upon hearing that he wasn't interested, he kindly handed him the printed document and demanded he read it soon. Lee Woo-seung took a quick look at the main text, feeling even more reluctant to discuss that order. He provoked even more indignation in the agent by nonchalantly raising his glass and deciding to get more ice. The commander suddenly said that, until Jin Ho-ye behaved, he wouldn't think about fulfilling his requests. To his greatest surprise, Kai Tai-min appeared behind him and quickly snatched the sheet from his hands. He read, astonished, the order regarding the basic training program for recruits in the Blast group. What shocked them the most was being asked to be instructors upon returning. The men were furious, given what they were paid, having to do this in another country. Suddenly, Lee Woo-seung stretched bored, saying that Ho Chana's death ruined his schedule. Jin Ho-ye was so shocked that he exclaimed his surprise at her death. However, Kai Tai-min retorted that Ho Chana was still alive, something the commander forgot. He said, reluctantly, that she better recover quickly so the team could work. The other man read the document, saying they could recruit replacements for the special squad. Lee Woo-seung listened boredly that there had already been novices, but they quit because of Kai Tai-min. Before, he was picky and obsessed with cleaning. The novices fled without putting up with Kai. And Min condemned him by recalling how he forced novices to drink boxes on the first day and put them to sleep instantly. They started insulting each other, talking about hazing and warrior brotherhood. Apparently, Lee Woo-seung couldn't stand their chatter and told them to return after the novices as soon as he left. Jin Ho-ji asked him at the last second which novice he would want. The commander didn't even know who to choose, although he had someone in mind. Suddenly, he became thoughtful, reflecting on what kind of person he would choose. Lee Woo-seung looked at a cloud and smilingly said he just didn't want to see the novice. The next day, Han So-ryung received a form for the Blast basic training. 10 weeks. The girl looked at the document surprised, not understanding why she was given this opportunity. Shortly before, the general manager said they urgently needed female agents. Hard to find. Furthermore, he affirmed that this time he had found something interesting that would help the company. When speaking with So-ryun about what she wanted, he discovered she wanted to kidnap the NRC deputy director. The girl didn't give him a clear reason, just said she wanted to do something really bad. The man thought about it carefully when she asked if a reason was necessary, and added that he wanted it as a reward. Although he refused, thinking it was an unjustified risk, he still considered her the best option for an operation. It was right after that call that the girl had the opportunity to train, something she thought about for a long time. In the hospital, she reread the content of the document over and over, as if she still couldn't make up her mind. She wearily thought about why she was participating in all this, as if the director wanted her to act on her own. Soryun looked at the clouds tiredly, wondering if she could get what she wanted. If she suddenly became an agent, immersed in her thoughts, she happened upon two schoolgirls, one of whom was using crutches. This event reminded her of when she herself was a schoolgirl and went through some of the worst moments. Promising as a gymnast, until a life-changing incident expelled her from school. The students looked at her with amazement, not understanding why she was back after being expelled. Suddenly, they remembered Hyun, famous for constantly tormenting others. She once suffered greatly because of Han Ryung, when the latter executed a forbidden move that provoked her. She had no choice but to repeat it to win, but that became her downfall. She tried to replicate the element, but lost her balance and fell, which took her out of the game for a long time. It was rumored that she had completely shattered her leg, unlike Han Ryung. Who did it perfectly? The girls didn't understand why it was so Ryung's fault, if Dion was the one who decided to repeat that dangerous element. However, they ignored how much So Ryung hated this sport, with such marked limits on the athlete's strength. That's why she thought it would be much more interesting to be off the mat. And she made a decision. Suddenly, she remembered that incident in the hospital, when Lee Woo-sing asked her if she remembered killing people. Now she understood that she didn't need to escape limits, but a new field where everything could explode and distort without restrictions. It seems So Ryung was always an unusual person who found charm in the bloody reality she was involved in. As soon as she read that they needed someone dissatisfied with society and with bad character, she sketched a mocking smile. After saying that described her, she was surprised to desire help, because in the field no one would jump or strive for you. She related all this to her experience in the sport, where she had to hold onto the bar by herself. The young woman concluded that only with her own effort would she fill the stage. And she advanced with a firm step. Finally, she found herself among the recruits chosen for basic training, where everything started from scratch for her. Apparently, besides her, there was that bully whom she had annoyed quite a bit during her work at the company. She listened intently to the information given by the speakers at the meeting and concluded that she had thought wrongly. The girl looked ahead, burning into her mind that this was only the beginning. To her surprise, the big guy sitting next to her decided to ask her what she was doing there after resigning. He wanted to humiliate her in public, asking if she was applying for a dishwasher position among the trainees. So Ryan looked down thoughtfully, saying that although she was better at cooking, sometimes things don't turn out well. All the men around her became tense when she said that happens, especially when someone dies. The big guy was surprised by her words, as he was unaware of everything she had been through in that time. He demanded that she stop getting in the way and leave, but she told him to stop pretending and drawing attention. With absolute certainty, the girl stated that she was no longer in a position to tolerate his antics. He was astonished when she mentioned her lecherous motive and proposed they stop pretending they knew each other and were friends. Her interlocutor was so primitive that her words aroused him instantly, and he called her completely crazy. He could barely answer her when they finally heard their commander's voice. He introduced himself calmly, as the leader of the special security team in charge of basic training. Lee Woo-jin naturally commented that his instructor team would do everything to train them. He mentally recalled the plan and announced that the basic training program would last 10 weeks in a private camp. The commander was about to continue his speech until he noticed the girl he least wanted to see there. The other agents didn't understand why he fell silent so suddenly, as if he had witnessed something bad. Nevertheless, he continued to watch Seo Ryung next to a soldier who wouldn't stop adjusting his fly. Just seeing that couple, veins showed on his face and his body filled with indignation at their behavior. He continued his speech and said that those who completed the basic training course would have the right to join the team. As soon as he finished speaking, he dragged Han Seo Ryung out, claiming she couldn't get on that bus. He simply ignored all demands to release her and reminded her that he never wanted to see her again. It seems Lee Woo-shing was unaware of the girl's ace up her sleeve until she threatened to call the general manager. She told him that although he fired her without hesitation, Kang Tae-gun, on the contrary, rewarded her for her action. Finally, she added that if he wanted to fire her again, he would first have to speak directly to him. Apparently, only after this threat did Lee Wuxing deign to reflect on her words and calm his fury. He remembered that in the end, he was the one hiring, not the director, and he made the decision to kick someone out of training. Lee Wuxing added that even men fail in those trainings, so she wouldn't last, and had nothing to do there. To his surprise, So Ryung replied that it was her decision whether she failed or clung on shamefully, so he couldn't judge her. At that moment, Lee Wuxing looked away thoughtfully and asked if her stubbornness had anything to do with her husband, the one she was talking about. The girl immediately asked if it would become a little clearer if she answered that. Indeed, that was the case. Suddenly, she asked how he planned to stop her, a woman willing to do anything to catch her fugitive husband. Immediately after, the girl said for the last time that her pride would not be affected, because without her husband, nothing can harm her. So Ryan asked him to demand of her in the training just like the others, but he only asked if revenge was driving her, or affection. Apparently, So Ryan noticed his change of emotions for the first time, and was amazed by how impacted he seemed to be. Suddenly, she started thinking that neither revenge nor affection could be explained with just a couple of words. Thinking about her husband, she felt resentment, affection, love, and hate. She could attribute any existing feeling to it. She suffered from such an excess of opposing emotions that she didn't even know how it was possible to describe all that. Then, So Ryan smiled sweetly and briefly replied that all of that together was driving her to continue. At that instant, Lee Woo-jin watched the girl attentively, capturing every emotion of the one who longed so much for his image. He decided to take one last step to dissuade her from that stage in her life. And sternly, he addressed her. Lee Woo-sing quickly approached Hansa Ryan, shortening the distance with the stubborn girl. He loomed over the potential recruit, telling her that he was about to reveal the truth to her. The man continued staring into her eyes, while she tried to guess what he was referring to. Suddenly, he spoke about how, by moving in this field, one begins to understand certain things happening around. Lee Woo-sing gave an example, calling love a kind of psychological manipulation used everywhere. He described it as a means to prevent someone from feeling alone, so that they are recognized. And only look at him. So Ryan suddenly felt that his words somehow fit her situation, and described her feelings for her husband. In a way, Lee Woo-sing described how he had felt while carrying out this mission, whose existence she was unaware of. He continued by saying that if the feeling that they are loved is also created, the person will easily mistake it for true love. It hurt So Ryan when he told her not to let her brain deceive her, as she might fall into a liar's traps. He added that the wretch might not even be thinking of her, and if he seeks revenge, he should get out and live well. To her surprise, So Ryan declared that her real revenge is not to live well, but for him to live poorly. She also added that even if everything he says is true, she wants to hear it from her own husband in person. Finally, Lee Woo-sin did not insist further and allowed her to pass the basic training program. In the empty barracks, the girl thought she should have restrained herself and not been so harsh that day. She called her commander a wretch and now regretted saying it, seeing how he sought to kick her out. Her thoughts were interrupted by a recruit's shout about how to live with a woman. That same idiot pointed at her and said he came to train, not to sleep in the same room as a woman. He was trying to annoy her and be rude, like a child afraid to show interest. The other recruits supported him and said to give her a separate room, as her presence was inappropriate. Saryun continued listening to their debate in silence, and her gaze crossed with her aggressor. What satisfaction! Suddenly, a guy approached her asking if she fought well, and which faction she belonged to. What intrigue! But before she could answer, a big guy burst in calling him an idiot, revealing that she was a servant of his group. With a certain air, he tried to remind her that she was the youngest and most beautiful of all the maids. What is soap opera? So Ryan looked at the man coldly when, Suddenly, he arrogantly accused her of being the one making advances toward him. They insisted she leave to avoid trouble, and even offered to give her their shower turn. And suddenly, at the door appeared Li Wu-jin, fixing his gaze on the fighter Sun Wuk-chen. He continued to glare at the enraged fighters, demanding an explanation for the whole fuss. As soon as he mentioned, he didn't want to share a room with a woman. When they asked him if he feared getting aroused, immediately after, he approached and asked them where they found idiots with such holes in their heads. Like children. Suddenly, he asked what they would do if a female agent was on the team, and then judged them for not seeing her as an equal. After this, he leaned over So Ryung with a predatory smile, asking mockingly what she desired. He knew it was provocative. She watched him as he rambled about whether a separate room would solve the problem. As the others suggested, immediately after, he pointed to himself, saying there were no free rooms, and that she would have to share it with the instructor. To his astonishment, the girl quickly brushed his hand away and coldly replied that she didn't need any of that. She couldn't believe her ears when she heard her demand that he not give her preferential treatment, despite the locker room issue. He tried to explain that he would see her change, but she only repeated his words, affirming that it was not a problem, reminding him that the inability to see a colleague as such was an intellectual problem. She pronounced the following. Soryung declared that she would sleep, bathe, and train at the same level as them, even if it meant suffocating. Her words sounded so desperate that Lee Wuxin didn't know whether he felt respect or fear at such determination. Finally, he threw the knife into her hands, telling her that surviving was her main objective. He affirmed that, in case of abuse or sexual harassment, she should first write a report and then report it. Preparing to leave, he turned around and to conclude, said that if he found a culprit, he would be expelled immediately. It seemed his words particularly affected Song Yuke-chan, who couldn't stop covering his pants with his head bowed. Confirming there were no objections, Li Wuzing ordered them to clean up that mess and gather their things. So Ryan didn't react to his words until that moment, but something finally sparked her interest. Suddenly, he said that if any of them decided to give up, they just had to ring the bell in the parade ground and leave. To finish, the commander concluded that they were not shaved recruits, and no one would punish them for deserting. The girl became alert when he looked directly at her and said he couldn't hold those guys back. He smiled, repeating that he couldn't forcibly detain those special individuals, willing to do anything for their career. After that talk, deep night fell and the soldiers slept in the barracks, unaware of the impending tragedy. That night, So Ryan barely slept, and by chance, noticed that someone had cracked open the enclosure door. She opened her eyes with difficulty, trying to detect the intruder, but what she saw left her completely shocked. The young woman cautiously observed that there was a smoke grenade on the floor that someone had thrown on purpose. She wanted to scream, but the man who threw the grenade suddenly asked her what was wrong with the situation. Although he wore a respirator, she could recognize her commander, who was blatantly mocking her. She looked at him with disapproval, while he glared at her, asking if they really thought they were going to sleep. Immediately after, he forcefully pushed her onto the bed, waiting for her to fall asleep from the smoke grenade substance. Upon opening their eyes, everyone was astonished to find themselves tied up on an inflatable boat in the middle of the sea. So Ryan glared at the instructor with hatred, while he, with a smile, commented that their dream had vanished. Li Wuxiang removed their masks one by one, remembering that he wouldn't let them sleep. Seo Ryung felt the ropes tightening her hands and feet as the start of basic training was announced. Li Wuxiang, smiling, invited them to start, dominating the first recruit, pressing him with his foot at the edge of the boat. The objective was simple, to stay afloat in the water, tied hands and feet. So Ryung couldn't believe it seeing how he threw them into the icy water, one after another. Sun Wuk-chan tried to beg the instructor for mercy, but he was the next one to fall into the water. Thus, Li Wuxian continued, with great pleasure, sending all the novices into the water, without fear of them drowning. He did this until only he and Seo Ryung remained on the raft, watching the others in terror. Finally, he looked at the girl haughtily and told her she couldn't give up by ringing the bell. He loved the wild look she gave him, cursing him internally for everything. He grabbed her by the jacket and submerged her in the water, asking if she didn't want to hit him in the groin. Li Wu Xing si burlo de ella, diciendo quesino queria iso, podiagal perlo en la magilla. While the others splashed and begged for rescue, he kept saying he would let her go if she hit him once. To her surprise, the girl only asked, annoyed, if she could spit on him. She, full of fury, replied that if he was going to give up, he should release her quickly, because she would never give up. Suddenly, he called her wicked and said her husband felt deceived, since she had been like that since before the wedding. She retorted that her husband hid much more, so all of that could be called a marriage of convenience. She was going to remind him that in that case she was the victim, but he let go of her hand at lightning speed. So Ryung, frightened, noticed she would fall directly into the water and felt true terror for her life. As soon as she fell into the water with a splash, her body was invaded by the icy water that chilled her to the bone. Seeing the instructor move away, sentencing her to death, she fleetingly felt her husband's face. Immediately after, the girl jumped up and coughed, feeling like she was desperately fighting to live. In the middle of the other men, So Ryan tried to shout at him, but he didn't even pay attention to her. Finally, Li Wuxin looked at the girl with weariness, who demanded to know if he planned to get them out of there. Her body was trembling from the cold, which allowed him to state that at this rate they would freeze to death. The soldiers around her agreed and began to demand that they be taken out. But the commander didn't even flinch. Suddenly, he said thoughtfully that there are accidents in training, even fatal ones, which alarmed them even more. It seemed those words gave him special pleasure, and then he said dreamily that the sun would rise in 10 minutes. Soryun couldn't believe he was so miserable, considering how happy he seemed inviting them to watch the sunrise. She barely asked him if she wanted to slap him. She replied furiously that now what she wanted was to bite him. Li Wuxing, his face radiant with joy, replied that although the use of force is acceptable, he does not approve of bite marks. At that moment, her hateful instructor seemed so satisfied that the soldiers around her could not contain their fury. While thinking her commander was a real bastard, So Ryan finally saw the sun's rays breaking through. Only after sunrise did Li Wuxing finally get every soldier onto the boat, after which they started the return trip. The soldiers, trembling from the cold, remained tied up, and more often the idea that they would freeze to death crossed their minds. It seemed So Ryan fully shared their feelings, given that her face also tensed in pain similarly. At first, she sat far from the rest of the men, but they offered her to move closer to warm up. Involuntarily, she felt like a penguin being warmed by other members of the flock, so as not to freeze to death. After thinking about it a bit, she finally took her place among the others, never stopping observing the commander. Only in that position, the soldiers finally felt the cold begin to retreat, although very slowly. Li Wusung mocked, saying at this rate they would undress each other. Sensing Han Soryang's furious gaze, he decided to punish her. He controlled the boat. He intentionally increased the speed so that the crowded warriors rolled across the deck. He seemed to enjoy it so much that he whistled a tune until they returned to the camp. Finally, they reached the shore, where he announced that they would not enter the barracks if they didn't untie themselves. With a smile, he demanded they hurry, or they would turn into frozen fish. Soryang watched as the warriors, stunned by the cold, tried to untie the ropes. Knowing this couldn't go on and no one would help her, she clenched her fists to act. Despite the pain in her back, she would perform a move that few could manage. The warriors were amazed at what she was about to do. An unnatural move. Even Li Wuxin almost whistled in surprise, seeing what she planned to do. Everyone was slack-jawed at the agility with which the girl moved her hands forward, ignoring the pain in her arms and shoulders. As soon as the members of the training group managed to get out, they ran straight to the hot shower. They were all engrossed in discussing the former maid, convinced she was a real monster. The girl was standing at the entrance of the shower and heard them saying that if her shoulder popped out, they would happily send her home. One of them commented that it would be a shame if she left, considering her pretty face. So pleasant to the eye. Apparently, Seo Ryung did not react to their words and continued waiting calmly for her turn to warm up. Lee Woo-jin, who appeared behind her, threw a towel at her with displeasure and asked if she wanted to freeze to death. Their tense gazes met, and then he demanded that she follow him immediately. Seo Ryung received his proposal with clear distrust, still not understanding what she could expect from him. He dragged her into a room and sentenced that, from now on, she would only use the shower there. As soon as she asked where they were, he replied with a smile that this was her home. Her home? Her reaction amused him. He extended his hand to her, telling her she was not in a position to choose. Libu Singla abruptly pulled, denying her opinion and turning on the water tap. What audacity! He held her firmly by the shoulders as the hot water drenched her, giving her a reprieve. Feeling the comforting heat, she asked what he was doing, to which he replied that he was relaxing her. He said her body was stiff, but she didn't understand why that detail mattered to him. Lee Woo-hong didn't like her tone after his kindness, but he restrained himself and didn't respond to her insolence. Suddenly, he asked her how much she was hiding from her husband, demanding to know everything about her subordinates. So Ryan admitted she hid a lot, fearing her good husband would flee upon truly knowing her. The girl confessed that she was able to shoot someone and not have nightmares, and that was just the tip of the iceberg. Knowing the character of her wonderful husband, she was sure he would run away if he knew who she really was. She was deceiving herself by thinking that by acting like a good girl, she could keep him, just as it had happened before. Suddenly, So Ryan said with a bitter smile that this was why she wanted to be the perfect wife. To always be by his side. What was her surprise when the water suddenly stopped and boss Lee Woo-jin appeared in front of her. He assumed her husband was also like her. But the girl could barely believe something like that was possible. In a way, she didn't even want to think about it, nor admit that something like that could happen. Not even she understood why she suddenly confessed like this to Lee Woo-jin, whom she sincerely despised. Sorian understood that if she admitted it, all those moments she considered love would instantly become a lie. After this, the girl moved away from the commander and demanded that he promise not to tell anyone about this conversation. Moreover, she suddenly smiled and told him that if he caught her husband, he should tell him she was shy and submissive. Lee Woo-jin tried to ask why he should do that, but she only replied that he was the first to ask all that. Very seriously, he said it was strange and recalled how she said she would take revenge on her husband if she caught him. What was her surprise when she impassively replied that of course she would take revenge and force him to fulfill his conjugal duty. Despite how comical her words were, Lee Woo-jin kept glaring at her, without taking his eyes off her. Suddenly, Sorian said she still loved him, even if it wasn't love to him, but he wouldn't refuse an act with her. After these words, he involuntarily reached out his hand towards the showerhead, which alerted her commander even more. She, with a threatening look at the man, said she just needed to get her husband back by any means, whether revenge or passion. So Ryan turned on the tap and pointed the sprayer at the instructor, telling him he would regret it if something went wrong. Apparently, Lee Woo-jin was so engrossed in this facet of her that he didn't even react to the drops of water covering his face. He just closed his eyes impassively and wiped his face with his hand, never stopping watching his protégé. After this, the girl turned off the water and told him fearlessly that she also knew how to be mean. The next day, the first official week of blast training began, starting on the sports field. Lee Woo-jin tortured his soldiers with different types of physical exercises, which included pull-ups. He talked to Sorna that whoever didn't reach the whistle would go without lunch. But Sorayan kept striving. Her body trembled with every repetition, while the instructor kept watching her attentively. Suddenly, he mockingly asked if she liked to sing, thus prolonging the moment of the repetition. She cursed at him mentally when he said he would blow the whistle if she encouraged him with her singing. As soon as he mentioned that soon all her comrades would go hungry, she felt pleading gazes upon her, burning with shame and anger. So Ryan, despite this, indulged him with her tired song about the beautiful land. Everyone froze in terror when her song turned into open mockery of the oppressive instructors. It seems even the other agents couldn't hide their fear of what Lee Woo-sung would do to the girl. He kept glaring at the insolent recruit, not even paying attention to the lyrics of her song. Finally, sunset arrived, announcing the end of the first training day. Sorian tightly rubbed her sore wrists, realizing she hadn't had a decent meal in days. She didn't have time to react when the instructor appeared in front of her, asking if she injected steroids. He leaned over the girl and told her that if he knew she was like this because of drugs, it would be much easier for him. As soon as she asked what he meant, he replied that she had changed a lot since their first encounter. And she was more dangerous. Like a father, he declared his assumption that she had many problems she was unaware of. So Ryung immediately countered that she didn't understand why he saw it as a problem that she surpassed the training. It seems Lee Woo-sung was quite perplexed by the enigma of the girl's resistance and uncontrollability. Suddenly, he squeezed her wrist and told her that if they didn't eliminate her, it could become a problem for him in the future. After that, he looked at her hand and said that enduring the bar with such a thin wrist without injections was doubtful. He immediately stared into the girl's eyes when she replied that she did have a point of leverage. Although she didn't want to talk about it, she looked away and said she wasn't afraid of almost anything, and that she was very impulsive. Since childhood, she didn't worry about her own pain or causing it to others. Except her husband. She surprised him by saying that in her childhood, she endured even tougher gymnastics. So this training was nonsense. Suddenly, Sorian unexpectedly noticed that in front of that man she always opened up and talked too much. The next instant, a familiar sensation suddenly invaded her, which she previously called instinct. She quickly withdrew her hand and looked aside, trying to capture that same scent that had captivated her soul. The girl attentively examined the man, whose scent reminded her so much of her husband. As soon as this man positioned himself behind Lee Woo-sung, she instantly saw Kim Hyun in him. She didn't understand if it was real or just an illusion, but this encounter plunged her into memories. Suddenly, she remembered a conversation with a merchant woman who gave her opinion on the reliability of Seo Ryung's husband. That day they went out to buy provisions, a task Kim Hyun was busy with at that moment. The woman spoke of how sturdy and handsome he was, and then asked where she had found such a husband. What was her surprise when Seo Ryung smiled thoughtfully and asked her to tell her more details. She smiled sincerely, bringing a stick closer, and then said she also wanted to see what her husband looked like. The woman instantly listed that his eyes had no double eyelids, his nose was straight and expressive, and he looked like an athlete. So Ryung tried hard to create a mental image of her husband, trying to remember every detail. Just as she savored the details, Kim Hyun approached, announcing that they had bought everything requested. With a smile, he showed her the bags and, concerned, asked if she wanted anything else. Days after the incident, the young woman trained as usual, surrounded by other fighters. The girl observed a man, thinking that there are things that perfume cannot imitate. Suddenly, she longed for the scent of her husband on those nights together. She sensed a similarity between her husband's smell and that man's, capturing his attention. She stopped abruptly to confirm her hypothesis, and a noticeable blush appeared on her face. Sorian knew an agent wouldn't have a reason to be there, but she would talk to him about washing clothes. She lagged behind the group, but tried to say she was willing to wash his uniform. She tried to justify it by saying she washed well, but a masculine hand covered her mouth. Lee Woo-sung abruptly covered her face, demanding that she not stop and run seriously. With the girl's eyes covered, she angrily waved her hand at the confused soldier, ordering him to run further. As soon as they were alone, he reprimanded her mercilessly for having lost, apparently down to the last neuron. Coldly, he stated that it was the second time he had seen the fighter hand Seo Ryung looking at other men. She grimaced when he said he would praise her with the knife if he caught her a third time, issuing a final warning about not tolerating romantic nonsense. Lee Woo-sung dashed off. The girl, thinking he wasn't looking, made an obscene gesture, thinking about what she would do if he didn't tolerate it. To her astonishment, Lee Woo-sung, as if he had eyes in the back of his head, saw what she did and ran towards her. He read her like an open book, showing with his expression that this should not be done. Never. Immediately after that look, he delivered a loud slap to her forehead, as if punishing a child. Suddenly, he dropped the bombshell. Why were you drooling over the instructor like a dog? That exasperated him even more. So Ryung, frowning, glared at him. She demanded an explanation. When did she drool? But Lee Woo-sing, relentless, continued. Stop looking for a replacement for your husband. That is not going to happen. In her room, after an exhausting day, the commander contacted the hacker. He needed more data on the girl. The hacker guessed. Did he want to know about her connection with the director? He said the trip to Thailand had impressed him. He added that since then, the director had reviewed Soa's resume and hired someone to investigate her. To his surprise, he discovered that Blast had long been trying to increase the number of female bodyguards. They recruited candidates from all over. They even trained them. There were records of everything in the databases. When director Kang Tae-gun traveled to Russia, he always took female bodyguards with him. What happened next was a mystery. They went together, but he always returned alone. Something very, very suspicious. After those words, Lee Woo-sung rubbed his forehead, exhausted, saying that the silly Buo got herself into very dangerous trouble. The hacker also said there was no information about what Kang Tae-gun did in Russia, since he found no travel data. After that, Lee Woo-seong said goodbye, asking him to inform him as soon as new information appeared. As soon as he turned off the earpiece, the hacker asked him if it was true that Boo-ho didn't recognize him. Not even when near her. Suddenly, he supposed she didn't suspect only because his face was different from Kim Hyun's. Lee Woo-seong calmly confirmed his words, because everything from the face, the head, and the body odor was fake. In this operation, they even increased his muscle mass to change the proportions of his real body. What was his surprise when this one suggested that Buo could only be crazy about types like Kim Hyun? Apparently, these conjectures submerged Lee Woo-young even further in his thoughts about the one who was once his faithful wife. And submissive. He was so tired of this whole old operation that he wanted to forget this story like a nightmare that wouldn't leave him alone. This man thought he would escape her by changing his identity, but he found him even there. The next day, the fighters gathered again for the next test. The girl supported Dong Jae-woo, another fighter, completely distressed about his body. It turns out he got so stressed that he accidentally soiled himself, right there. So Ryun tried to explain that it was a mistake due to the pressure change, and no one saw it. But he was still upset. He couldn't allow the only one below her in the ranking to leave. He was last in everything. Understanding that she had to help him relax and overcome this embarrassing moment, Saryun gently touched his shoulder. Suddenly, very seriously, she told him that any excrement is valuable and his is no exception. Saryun firmly stated that healthy digestion is not a reason for shame, and he shouldn't run away. She asked him directly if he would run away because of such foolishness, but the boy remained devastated. Meanwhile, on the other side of the pool, the commander was answering whether the girl seemed pretty to him. Jin Hojio, clumsily, confessed that lately she hadn't stopped staring at him. He admitted, with total sincerity, that she was the first woman who looked at him with such desire. As if she wanted something. The man, excited, told the commander that he might soon have a girlfriend. Lee Woo-jin was going to scold him, but he interrupted him, assuring him it would be very delicate. However, his hopes were dashed when Lee Woo-jin warned him that she had a husband. Suddenly, he suggested insulting the husband. That way he would check if she truly loved him and couldn't live without him. The commander warned him not to try it if she had a weapon, because she was quite obsessed. Jin Goyo still didn't believe it and remembered the seductive gaze, but was immediately interrupted. Finally, Lee Woo-jin stared at him and told him he wasn't the only one who found her pretty. So shut your beak. After a while, the commander gathered all the soldiers at the pool, right where he was going to conduct the next training. Saying they had to make an improvised raft, he demanded that the soldiers take off their pants behind the instructor. It seems he gave this task on purpose, because everyone else started looking shyly at Hyun, so Ryan. The girl instantly felt a horrible sense of humiliation and barely moved, as if not knowing what to do. It seems Lee Wuksun noticed that she was the only female soldier wearing pants and called her by name. The commander sternly said she had no reason to accept someone who cannot save themselves. He purposely focused all attention on the girl, knowing she could give up under the pressure. Soryun remained standing in the same spot, as if nailed, while the other soldiers glared at her. The commander sighed tiredly and was about to say that this stage would be postponed due to the circumstances. But she protested. The girl angrily rejected his decision and moved her legs, taking off her pants. The other fighters looked at their comrade with shame, about to be left in their underwear. It seems only after this unexpected pressure did she manage to overcome her confusion and obey the order. Immediately after, the girl impassively pulled up her pants and stared fixedly at her insistent instructor. Their gazes met instantly, and Lee Wuksun noticed a shadow of resentment and shame in Seo Ryan's eyes. In the end, they completed the training, left the boats in the pool, and dispersed. Knowing that Seo Ryan would finish last, he ordered everyone to run to the barracks without looking back. Taking the opportunity, Seo Ryan tried to leave, but Lee Woo-seong ordered her to stay. The girl looked at him perplexed, not noticing the last fighter passing right behind her. Thus, they were left alone in the pool, maintaining that inexplicable eye contact that arose between them. After a brief silence, she got up and thanked him. But she doubted his intentional kindness. Translation failed. At first, So Rae-young barely reacted, until she remembered that her underwear was soaked and transparent. The girl blushed instantly and tried to stop him, aware that he might have seen everything. However, she fell suddenly when Lee Woo-sin leaned into her ear and demanded that she shut up. So Rae-young was trembling with indignation and rage, but still allowed him to finish what he had started. Finally, he tied the desired knot in her belt and then tightly fastened her waist with his sleeves. After this, Lee Woo-sin straightened up, positioning his sleeves so that her underwear would not be visible to anyone. As soon as he let her go, he mischievously asked her why she was staring at him like that. The commander was so absorbed in the task that he didn't understand anything until she told him. Embarrassed that her nipples were erect, the man quickly scanned the girl with his gaze when she, with difficulty, uttered the words that everything could be seen on her. He watched with pleasure as her gaze ran back and forth, embarrassed, seeing him in a swimsuit. Although he was the one who should blush, he deliberately approached Soryun to surprise her. She fled the room as fast as she could upon hearing him say that he, unlike her, was not wet. From that moment, time passed relentlessly and the 5th week of blast training arrived. It was time for sparring. The commander announced the pairs, and one was Song Uk-chan and Han So Ryan, who had hated each other for a long time. In a stern tone, the commander demanded that they step forward and collect the equipment. And they obeyed the order. They were given the equipment in turns, the main piece being a huge protective helmet for the head. It seems So Ryun had never seen anything like it, and examined the helmet with some confusion. Meanwhile, Song Yu-chan was already preparing for the fight, and, as usual, put the blue helmet on his head. The girl was so focused on observing her opponent that she didn't even notice the instructor in front of her. He calmly helped her put on the helmet and told her to try first and then master the combat technique well. As soon as she stepped into the ring, her furious opponent lunged at her, hitting her with all his might. She strove to protect her head, feeling her skin hit her again and again. Sun Uk-chan held nothing back, eager for revenge against the girl, but she applied her secret technique at the last moment. With such force, she hit the big guy's weak spot that he doubled over in pain, bowing his head to the floor. The instructor, observing the scene, asked his commander tensely what that forbidden technique was. However, he calmly replied that it was nothing more than a simple and dirty fight for survival. Seeing how his former target desperately fought against a man who dwarfed her in size, he felt he had been deceived. Involuntarily, he doubted whether she was really the delicate girl he had lived with, and whom he had been deceiving all this time. His mission was to maintain the marriage, so from the moment they got close until her disappearance, the task was practically complete. He knew he no longer needed to watch the change soba, but something still obliged him to complicate everything. The commander was so lost in thought that he noticed the girl on the floor at the last moment. He ordered a stop, but Sun Wook-chan didn't want to stop the fight where he was finally pounding her. She thought she would feel another blow to the head, but instantly her opponent was no longer by her side. She turned her head and saw that he was on the other side of the mat. And Lee Woo-sing was watching him. The commander tried to remain calm, but still asked why he was making him repeat things twice. Pushing the fighter away from the fragile girl, he said that today he would teach them the military martial art Krav Maga. He added that it was a combat system based on human instinctive reflexes, including intuition. The commander explained that its value lay in the ability to disarm an opponent armed with bare hands. After that, with a predatory smile, he asked Song Wook-chan if he wanted to aim at the instructor. The beaten fighter cautiously took the pistol and then fulfilled the dangerous Lee Woo-sin's request. As soon as he tried to aim the weapon at him, when snap, he snatched it from his hands with one blow. At the same time, he explained to them how they should defend themselves, evade attacks, and strike mercilessly. In the end, he began to hit the sturdy fighter so hard that he left him completely disoriented. The others watched in fear as he delivered precise blows to vital points capable of killing. Finally, he stood over the trembling fighter, concluding that these attacks were devastating. It seems he beat Sun Wook-chan so brutally that he stopped showing signs of life and remained still. Lee Woo-sin explained that in Krav Maga, technique is key, more than brute force. So you can use it. Then he looked at the girl and told them that they should not give up against an opponent just because he is bigger. Days later, the fighters ate together, commenting on the early departure given the harsh selection. They prayed not to end up with instructor Lee Woo-sin, because just thinking about being with him terrified them. It seems so Hyun didn't understand what they were talking about and asked. So they decided to explain everything to her. They say Lee Woo-sin comes from a mercenary organization known for its brutality. They practiced hanging them upside down, beatings, electric shocks, and injections that damaged the nervous system. After that talk, they gathered in a hall and Lee Woo-sin solemnly called it torture training. He promised with all seriousness that the instructors would use any cruel method to make them talk. Therefore, the soldiers had to memorize the coordinates and not reveal them for 2 whole days. So Ryan's coordinates pointed to Nevsky Avenue in St. Petersburg, something she was unaware of. Moreover, the commander said they would learn to overcome pain with willpower and how to act in an interrogation. The soldiers were surprised to hear him cunningly say that he hoped to see them again with all their limbs intact. Afterward, everyone began to fall to the ground in a strange order, as if they had been injected with some sedative. Saryan noticed everyone's strange behavior with bewilderment. But soon she too collapsed to the ground, exhausted. The last thing she saw before completely passing out was the piercing gaze of the annoying Lee Woo-sin. In the end, not even a minute passed before all the fighters ended up on the floor, completely unconscious. In the realm of Morpheus, So Hyun relived the day her beloved husband coldly said goodbye to her. She remembered over and over how she tried to stop him, sensing that something was wrong with him. Sensing the worst, she almost begged him not to leave, although she didn't even imagine it would be their last encounter. She begged him not to leave her alone, knowing how hard it was for her. But he answered her words with the same coldness. Tears shone in her eyes when he sternly called her by name. And there was no trace of the previous tenderness in his voice. That day she couldn't see his face, but with all her being, she felt that mocking smile when he told her she was crazy. The next instant, the young woman woke up as after a nightmare and felt her hands suspended above her head. Her eyes immediately met the predatory gaze of Lee Woo-sing. He would be her torturer. He leaned back in his chair, devouring the sight of the girl hanging by her hands, practically naked. It seems so Ryung still hasn't understood her situation and directly asks if they put something in their food. After the question, the man stands up and cunningly calls it a trade secret, something she cannot reveal. The girl tensed instantly when he recited her coordinates and said he already knew the content of the note. Seeing her reaction, he declares that today he wants to hear something different from her. So don't make that face. The man took a foldable metal rod from the table and asked if she ever thought about what they do to prisoners. He tells her how in South Africa they throw naked female prisoners into cells with men. And they torture them. Lee Woo-sing threw the rod aside and asked her to imagine what would happen to her if she were in blast. Under his command, very seriously, he squeezed her chin and added that she would have to do the dirty work. One that will destroy her. The commander recalled her shyness even when stripping naked in the water, and that she knows one thing, but ignores another. So Ryan could not contain her astonishment when he lifted her shirt, touching her chest, and said he would personally instruct her. He shamelessly mocked the girl, touching her where he shouldn't, provoking even more shame and revulsion. Achieving the desired reaction, he brazenly lifted her clothes and sentenced that he would show her what she was overlooking. So Ryan demanded that he release her, but he counterattacked by talking about what would happen to a female fighter if captured abroad. The girl insulted him with all her might, but he kept insisting on situations where she would only be left to endure. After this, he squeezed her chest hard and added that she should stop blaming everything on fighting spirit and simple ideology. Lee Woo-sing repeated that she was an obstacle, that she shouldn't even look at those places, but live her normal life. It seems he enjoyed his position and with complete sincerity ordered her to disappear and not even try. Despite everything, she looked at him with even more determination when he demanded that she say she would never look for a husband again. Translation failed. Translation failed. Translation failed. Translation failed. Translation failed. Translation failed. So Ryan didn't understand the consequences and said that for her it would be much better. With that, he further exasperated the man, who then pronounced the name of instructor Jin Hajai. Suddenly he asked if she preferred him to touch her, but so Ryan was hearing that name for the first time. Lee Woo-sing squeezed her butt and asked if that boar resembled her husband, filling her with fury. He said that if she liked sturdy types like a rock, she had vision problems. But she confirmed it. As soon as she said yes, he looked like her husband, he retorted that there are those one can look at, and those one cannot. So Ryan called him crazy and a pervert when he said Jin Ho-yi was the second type. And then he touched her. After that, Lee Woo-sing approached threateningly and decreed that civilized conversations were over. The girl was speechless when he touched her with his fingers, attentively observing her facial expression. It gave him sadistic pleasure to see how her body began to tremble from the movements of his hand. She tried to say it hurt, but he judged her instantly, telling her to relax, which she disagreed with. He was stunned, waiting for her to call him a bastard and tell him to just stick it in and stop talking nonsense. After those words, he added a finger and told her he was sick of her blind loyalty to her husband, that it rather seemed like an illness. He kept almost digging his hand into her, telling her she had to give up her obsession and leave all that behind once and for all. As soon as he told her to live a normal life, she replied that she precisely needed her husband to live normally. She added that it was her husband who gave her what she didn't have since birth and what she couldn't enjoy in life. How intense! She said she saw nothing wrong with blind loyalty. After which, he directly asked her if she was willing to endure everything. He wanted to hurt her, but she contained her feelings and asked why the hell she should run away from him. What a dilemma. After those words, she looked at the man almost maniacally and told him she had nothing in common with her beloved husband. Shocking. It seems it hurt the instructor's ego, who said that Jean Hoj didn't care if he had any virtue. What situation? The girl demanded that he take the taser and put it in her ear, but he only lifted his leg. Immediately after, he noticeably sped up the movements of his hand, causing her body to tremble with pain. Mixed with some pleasure, he said he was disgusted that she compared him to her husband, similar to Ho Jio, and ordered her to open her eyes. Despite all the hatred and pain, Soryan obeyed his request, observing what he was doing to her body. His actions were so fast and precise that she inevitably felt the imminence of an unexpected end. Although Li Wuzin strained to punish her to the maximum, an excited blush appeared on his face. As soon as the girl let out an embarrassing prolonged moan, he mockingly asked her if she was done yet. At first, Soryan didn't react to his words, until her gaze fixed on how his pants were tightening. It seemed that, at that moment, she realized again that he was openly attracted to her. And he didn't just want to test her. Li Wuzin couldn't hide his surprise when she suddenly asked if he would take out his member after his fingers. The girl changed in an instant and trapped him with her legs, wanting him to take it out and show how curved it was. The man was astonished by what she said, but only mentioned his husband's most peculiar characteristic in bed. Li Wuzang fell when she thoughtfully said that its tip was slightly curved, like a hook, and its shape was unusual. Suddenly, she looked at him with her maniacal gaze and said that hers was also curved, and that they could quickly compare them. The girl shamelessly pressed against him with her crotch and added that she could dedicate herself to checking men with that shape. Li Wuxiang was so shocked by everything she did that, in the first few seconds, he couldn't even articulate a word. Xiao Ryang suddenly let go that she always thought sexual intercourse was only possible with her husband. But he proved her wrong. Suddenly, he coldly added that she could try with him, immediately combining it with a torture session. The instructor froze when he saw her gazing enchanted at his fly and asking him to let her try his. Although the whole situation remotely excited him, he remained still, paralyzed by surprise. After this, he abruptly moved away from the girl and looked for the bucket, saying they would act as if he hadn't heard her coordinates. Then he placed the bucket under her feet, commenting that the prisoner was so smart that she didn't reveal all the information. So Ryan questioned him about it in surprise, but he had already turned away, holding his forehead. In shock, he was trying to contain his inner rage, about to blurt out something about his attributes. But he was interrupted. Li Wuzing froze when the girl, with a predatory look, asked if instructor Jin Hoyi had an identical apparatus. After that question, he bolted out of the torture room, slamming the door shut behind him. Days later, all the fighters eagerly commented on the details of the tests, knowing that Li Wuzing tortured So Ryan. The second boy said that the commander brutally beat the instructor who tortured him, swearing not to stop until he heard the coordinates. He also added that if he spoke too much again, the guilty party would be the instructor who trained him. And he got beaten all right. Throughout that time, he savagely beat him with a chair, so much so that it was hard to bear the scene. The fighters thought it was psychological torture, but only So Ryan understood that he was just expressing his rage. She didn't know which instructor he beat until the boys revealed who it was. Finally, she discovered with astonishment that the instructor was none other than Jin Ho-yi, the one she liked so much. Her interlocutor immediately interrupted her, mentioning her 48-hour water test. She decided to play along and said she got a little angry, but it wasn't as terrible as it could have been. Suddenly, she cunningly said she felt liberated, as if she had entered something unknown. Her friend got scared, thinking she enjoyed the tortures, but she only said that her eyes opened to something else. She thoughtfully shared that what they did to her gave her the feeling of having broken some kind of taboo. Meanwhile, Li Wuzin, whose taboo she broke, continued furiously venting on the targets at the shooting range. He repeatedly remembered how she spoke of that intimate peculiarity of her husband, the one she knew best. Every time he thought of those words, he shot, feeling rage boiling under his skin. The man could not forget the lewdness in her gaze when she said she desired to do it precisely with him. He had been at the shooting range for a long time, so there were more holes than he had anticipated. Feeling that not even this helped him, he narrowed his eyes tiredly and understood that not even his body could recover. A second instructor appeared beside him, calmly talking about the beating of Ji Ho Yi, who was almost tortured. He rolled his eyes tiredly when the commander asked him if he was angry about bothering his friend. Lee Woo-sin asked Kai Taemin if they had been friends since childhood, to which he replied affirmatively. What was his surprise when, from a distance, he implied that they must have often been together in the bathtub. After that, Lee Woo-sin lowered the weapon and cunningly suggested what might be down there on Jin Ho-yi. He didn't finish the sentence when he left, saying that the owl's hoot could drive anyone crazy instantly. Leaving the shooting range, he thought again about how burdensome everything was during the past operation. He was annoyed by the days together and the walks, where he had to pretend to be a kind husband. However, strange feelings now invaded him, like a thirst that she wouldn't forget him. He still reviewed her determined words, not understanding why she was so persistent. Finally, he understood that it was impossible to control Han's Orion, and he had to choose a path. Days later, the soldiers went to a conference, happy about the recovery time. They normally commented how much they wanted to see their mothers, and that it wasn't worth recovering. It seemed that So Ryan was almost the only one who couldn't stop remembering the moments of her recent torture. Because of these intense memories, her cheeks flushed and she thought perhaps she suffered from PTSD. As soon as she relived the details of her torture, her punished torturer calmly entered the room. Lee Woo-chik began his usual lesson on espionage methods, but Seo Ryong didn't pay attention to him. It was so monotonous that many soldiers unintentionally fell asleep, while the girl drew in her notebook. Finally, he spoke about Hell Week, after which some would be sent to dangerous countries. He grimly spoke of places where crime thrives, because in those spots his mercenaries would flourish. He said they would all go to hell for their sins, and insisted on abandoning their neighbor and saving oneself. Suddenly, Seo Ryong condemned his words and said that if she had to meet God, the gates of hell didn't seem so bad. She also added that if that was the only place they could meet, she would have to go there precisely. Lee Woo-sik attentively watched the impudent girl as she said that if she went, she would do it with joy. And as is proper. As soon as their gazes met, the girl remembered the night he devoured her with his eyes during the torture. It seems that now that night was solely associated with what happened between them and caused an ashamed blush. The girl didn't understand why she felt so strange, as if a growing agitation and confusion invaded her from within. After his speech, the commander chuckled and commented that she had an astonishing talent for talking about wanting to die. Suddenly, he laughed mockingly and asked if they would meet if they remained sitting at the gates of hell. As soon as he mentioned that everything he knew were only images painted by others, she instantly remembered it. Lee Woo-sin leaned over her and asked how she intended to recognize him before doubting her words. Finally, he concluded that even if God were in front of her, she wouldn't even notice that it was him. After class ended, Lee Woo-sin walked directly to the spot where So Ryan was sitting, the only one who forgot her notebook. At first, he didn't see exactly what the girl had written in her notebook, and decided to approach to examine it. The instructor took the notebook in his hands and quickly flipped through it, observing the short scattered notes. However, his gaze was immediately drawn to an indecent drawing, after which he felt her exasperating him again. Hell Week has begun, explaining to them that for a cornered mercenary, enemy territory is hell. 7 days without sleep, without changing or going to the bathroom await them, something they will experience firsthand during training. With each passing day, filled with exhausting training, they dangerously approach madness, destroyed by fatigue and sweat. So Ryan wonders why she must endure such torments to catch her husband. Lee Woo-jin mocks each and every one of them, causing a new wave of hatred and aggression inside her. With a mocking smile, he displays a bottle of whiskey, remembering that they only have dirty water around them. The commander leans over a soldier and with a cunning smile offers him at least a sip of good liquor. Immediately after, he begins to disdainfully pour the alcoholic drink over the heads of the soldiers in the plank position. So Ryan watches this unpleasant scene with revulsion, aware that it could soon be her turn. As soon as he finishes soaking a couple of men's heads, he walks directly to Han So Ryan, eager to talk to her. the man looked at the recruit seriously and assured her that unforeseen events always arise in the field. With a simple phrase, he summarized all the dangerous situations she experienced, saying that a leader must solve them quickly. He knelt before the girl and continued lecturing her on how a true commander must act. Li Wuzhang declared that, until now, he had only focused on eliminating immediate variables. But he decided to change that. After a short pause, he suddenly poured the rest of the liquid over her head and wished her to endure all the coming hell. Right after the plank position, they did many other drills, carrying a boat on their heads once. And again. Also, they had to be quick reacting in the water and transport logs. Also on their heads. On one of the days of Hell Week, Su Ryung thought she would go crazy from the load. But she carried on. Finally, the last hours of Hell Week arrived, which they had to spend in the cold by the seashore. Apparently, even the bravest soldiers were so exhausted that they were on the verge of madness. At a critical point, So Ryan, with a desperate look, told her friend that she was about to faint. He tried to stop her, as fainting meant expulsion, but she insisted he keep quiet. Finally, she fainted, not without first asking her friend not to look Li Wuzin in the eyes. Apparently, So Ryan's words only increased his tension, and he spied on the instructor with the corner of his eye. Mentally, he begged him to just pass by and pay no attention to either him or So Ryan. However, Li Wuzin smelled fear, like a predator smelling its prey, and kept observing the couple. The situation became tenser and tenser as he approached and began observing So Ryan. He also didn't miss how the boy carefully watched his comrade, checking if she was still conscious. The boy tried to decipher the inscription the girl had left in the sand, as if fighting not to fall asleep. Seeing that her husband's name was written in the sand, Li Wuzing immediately erased it, feeling that reading it would drive him crazy. He stopped dead above the girl and shouted, asking where she came from and why she drove him crazy. But before finishing the sentence, he suddenly noticed that her eyes were tightly closed. At that moment he froze, feeling rage because, even half asleep, she was still thinking of Kim Hyun. Trying to calm down, he quickly moved away from the girl, pretending for a moment not to have noticed. His companion kept observing the girl intently, trying somehow to endure the icy sea air. Meanwhile, So Raijun completely disconnected, and only a slight tremor in her body indicated that she could still wake up. Li Wuzin kept stealthily observing her every move, as if trying to make a decision. Finally, he moved away from the formation of the fighters and breathed the icy air, aware that his destiny was now in his hands.